Were you a big Lost head?
I was super into Lost.
Were you on the forums and stuff? Because I was on the forums and stuff.
I wasn't, but bizarrely, my mother was. My mother was hardcore. My mother was hardcore into the Lost forums. And every week we had to have an argument over whether Lost spoilers were acceptable conversation at the dinner table. It was a combination of things, right? And so she is genuinely an extremely earnest person. I don't think there was anything surreptitious about this. However, it did just so happen multiple times that she would say something and be like, wasn't that crazy when that happened on Lost? And it had not happened yet, even remotely. Is like, I don't know, Mom, was it crazy? You know better than me.
What was your mom doing, like the ARG and stuff? Like, was she like reading like Evil Twin or Bad Twin or whatever, which was the book they released that was written by one of the passengers on Oceanic Flight 815 that was a tie-in to the show that you had to read in its entirety in order to get a code to then go to a website that then played a video about like the next episode of Lost?
What? No, I've never heard of this.
Like you could just read a full chapter storyline on a pallet of Slusho cups.
Wait, what was that?
That's just a joke.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the Worst of All Possible Worlds, the first and only podcast that's got those jokes, baby. I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Bryans.
And I'm the worst of all possible Joshes. And despite what you might think from the beginning of this episode, we're not here to talk about Lost.
But we will be someday.
Okay, so we're going to take all of the J.J. Abrams and we're going to shove it firmly to the side
We're going to crumple them up and throw them in the trash.
That's right,
in the
Brian,
mystery box.
Because we are back for more Whit's Endless Summer.
What?
Yes, it is the ongoing sub-series of the Worst of All Possible Worlds in which we listen to episodes of the radio drama Adventures in Odyssey, produced by Focus on the Family, an evangelical organization in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Let's go. But here's the thing. This week, not only are we listening to episodes of Adventures in Odyssey, we're also listening to some adult content.
That's right.
Oh.
That's right. Paul McCusker got into the adult entertainment industry.
Not that adult entertainment industry.
Fully grown followers of Christ.
That's right.
We are talking about Focus on the Family radio theater, and more specifically, this will all be in the second half, Father Gilbert Mysteries.
We're not alone here today. We actually have a wonderful guest coming along with us that we have inflicted this material on.
Coerced.
Yes, he is the co-creator and lead writer of the Penumbra Podcast, which is the bi-weekly audio drama home to Juno Steel and Tales of the Second Citadel. Welcome to the show, Kevin Vibert.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for, I don't know if thank you is the right word, but but you are having me. So that does deserve to be marked.
And we're happy to have you.
We are.
Because
I am happy to be here. I am happy to be here. Thank you.
Because you've been you're a real, when it comes to audio drama, you're a real subject matter expert. I mean, you have been now creating audio dramas with Penumbra for 8 years, right?
Yep. We started production almost exactly 9 years ago.
Wow.
Our first episode was released about 8.5 years ago. Yeah.
So before we get into talking about the world of Focus on the Family radio drama, I'd love to hear a bit more about your experience with doing audio drama. What has your experience looked like so far, and what have you learned along the way?
Kind of in summary, we've been making it up as we go along. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have no specific training in writing audio drama. I have no specific training in writing scripts. My whole, background before this was when I was 18, I started a daily writing practice, 1,000 words a day, and I've just been chugging along ever since. Wow. So I wrote a lot of trunk novels that'll never see the light of day because they're bad. Then, I was in the middle of a project and I was really frustrated with how it was going. And a friend of mine and I were like, what if we, tried writing some of these old radio plays? And we more or less thought we had invented audio drama, and we were disabused of that notion very quickly. But from there, we've been kind of making it up as we go along. So, at this point, I feel like I know a lot about writing for sound and about, what is the kind of the condensed nugget of an episode. But before that, most of my knowledge was about sort of the genres we were writing in. I'd spent a lot of time studying, crime fiction and studying's not really the word because it's just what I read a lot when I was a kid. I read a lot of fantasy.
So when you say sort of finding the nugget, can you tell me a little bit more about that and what that looks like for you?
A friend of mine put this really, really well a couple years ago. And it's that I do think that for a lot of artistic pursuits, you learn a lot of the theory in a very explicit sense to start. And when you start, you're doing an impression of that theory, right? It's like, I understand plot arc. I understand what tension is. I understand what character is in a theoretical sense. And eventually you just do it for long enough that you start to gain an instinct for it. And you can just kind of tell what an episode feels like, right? What a satisfying arc feels like. On the one hand, it's not at all a useful definition because that was just a very wordy way of saying, I don't know, vibes, man. But beyond that, I do think that one of the things that we've always tried to do is something significant has to happen in every episode. You cannot walk away from the episode feeling like if this didn't happen, it would not make a difference.
Kevin, could you do me a favor? Could you go to Focus on the Family and just scream that through the window until maybe somebody listens? Because Jesus Christ.
We have their address.
We've been there.
It's great that you say that because I have been looking to make some enemies. So,
great. Yes. Great. No better one. No better one. Kevin, I'm also really excited to have you on the show because I think that you are an extraordinary writer of mysteries.
Oh, thank you.
And so we've brought you here today to make you listen to what happens when somebody has no idea how to write a mystery. It's something that you had no idea about, right? This whole world of Adventures in Odyssey. You had never heard of Focused on the Family. That's correct?
Yes. I was talking to you about this a little while ago. In fact, one of the questions I'm going to have for you guys when we get into Adventures in Odyssey in particular is I am completely new to the genre of Christian children's entertainment. I grew up in like a family that did not really practice religion in any way other than we said the word Christmas around December. That was about it. I didn't see VeggieTales till I was in college. Like, this is not my world at all.
Who showed you VeggieTales in college?
Legitimately, I had friends who like were just like these songs rip. I don't know what to tell you. They really liked them.
They are the pirates who don't do anything for a reason.
That may have been the one. And at that point, I was also already working in special ed.
Okay.
At work, I was seeing a lot of Sesame Street and a little bit of VeggieTales and things like that. So
VeggieTales is, to say the least, playing in a different register from Adventures in Odyssey.
It seems like.
You had sent me an email as well when we were putting this episode together, Kevin, regarding Adventures in Odyssey. You said, and I quote from the email, "Jesus, that's a hell of a thing, isn't it?" So would love to hear your first impressions about Adventures in Odyssey, its world, and just like that whole thing.
So I've listened to a good chunk of The Worst of All Possible Worlds at this point. So I know that you guys are very steeped in this world.
I'm afraid so.
Unfortunately. So, I think one of the things that I'm going to try to get across over the course of this episode is just how culturally blindsided I feel by everything happening in here.
Yes!
I was not prepared from your podcast for either A, the opening theme of Adventures in Odyssey. What the hell is that? Or when part 3 wraps up, they immediately get into Bible talk. And the whiplash was wild for me. I could not.
Amazing.
Yeah. This is, I knew theoretically that this happened out in the world, but I don't know. As a kid, Jesus was not on my radar. I didn't ever think about it.
Well, it's because you weren't listening to Adventures in Odyssey. Right. Come on.
Yeah. Or to your heart, Kevin.
That's true. That's true. We do customarily end every episode with an altar call where you can come forth, confess your sins, be washed clean in the blood of the Lamb.
They forcibly converted me, so you know.
For this week specifically, we are delving into the mind of Paul McCusker, one of the main writers on Adventures in Odyssey. And Brian, I think you wanted to do a McCusker Forward episode for a while and really talk about his whole deal.
McCusker Forward episode makes it sound like a product. This is art, baby. This is a Paul McCusker diptych. This is sort of like the Garden of Earthly Delights if it was missing a panel.
This is Sunday in the Park with George, but for the dumbest man alive.
Sunday in the Park with Paul.
He's the second dumbest man alive because he works with an even dumber man.
Yeah, that is true.
Paul McCusker is a man with a lot of very interesting, I don't know what to say, peccadillos The more I listen to his later output, the more I'm like, wow, this guy just is Rod Dreher. What we'll see with his Odyssey episode here is one, just something that's a little bit better crafted than what Phil Lawler can do.
Yes.
Which is, again, I want to make sure that my praise is as faint as possible here. The trilogy that we're going to listen to here is like not too interested with like Bible stuff, is more just interested in taking characters that we kind of already know and then doing something with them that he hasn't been able to do on the show before. And the follow-up to this, the Father Gilbert stuff, is where he really gets to let his freak flag fly. And he gets to talk about all of the spiritual warfare stuff that he's gotten so interested in. He gets to enjoy his like old church stuff, his G.K. Chesterton stuff before... This was when he was still Anglican and hadn't quite converted to Catholicism yet.
The last Wits End the Summer that we did was focusing on James Dobson, like sort of the mastermind of Focus on the Family. But Paul McCusker is sort of like...
The Apostle Paul.
The Apostle Paul, the one who saw that vision through and made it into a show. So we are seeing we're kind of tracking our way through the history of Focus on the Family and the major player heads who... make the show what it is to start.
And McCusker's like a frustrated artist. He has more things that he wants to do than what he's able to do, either within the bounds of Adventures in Odyssey, a show for children, or within the bounds of evangelical Protestantism.
It is also very telling that McCusker is like the one guy in that entire group that is actually engages with outside media. And we'll get to that a little bit more in Father Gilbert Mysteries, but he actually sees value in secular work and tries to ape it as often as possible, mostly by making Adventures in Odyssey into Doctor Who, which we see in a lot of the Imagination Station episodes. This episode that we're covering today, though, it's not very high fantastical. This one is in fact Law and Order Odyssey.
But what it is the opportunity to use the tools of audio drama at his disposal in a way that he hasn't done before.
Yeah. This is The Perfect Witness, which is a 3-parter, episodes 309 to 311. All of these episodes were written and directed by Paul McCusker, and they were originally aired on subsequent weeks, so April 8, April 15, and April 22 of 1995. Now, these episodes, as all episodes of Adventures in Odyssey do, opened with that great theme song.
Hi, this is Chris. I'm glad you could join us for Adventures in Odyssey, a place of discovery, imagination, and excitement. But don't take my word for it. Find out.
I don't know what to call it other than low rent Disney, guys. Like it's so clear what they're going for, and it is it's hammy is what it is. It's really over the top in that direction. And given how not all, but a lot of these performances, I think, are actually fairly restrained. It is a bizarre like juxtaposition, the sweeping intense orchestral score followed by something that feels very muted by comparison.
Well, just to be clear, are we talking about right now Father Gilbert or Adventures in Odyssey? Because I would argue that in Adventures in Odyssey, these performances are not particularly restrained.
No, that's fair. I mean, there are a few roles in particular in Odyssey that I take issue with the performances.
Okay.
But you're right. In part one, we do open on Holstein, who he's working so hard, man.
Yeah, let's roll that beautiful Holstein footage.
Yeah, gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be of your assistance. I have put true crime stories over here in our non-fiction crime section.
Oh, thanks.
I maintain an exhausting supply of both new and second-hand books.
Great. We'll take it from here.
My name, by the way, is Fred Holstein, which is why we call this shop Holstein Books.
So this is Kenneth Mars. We've talked about him on this show before. Longtime character actor. My favorite role of his is probably Franz Liebkind, the guy who writes Springtime for Hitler in Mel Brooks's The Producers.
My God.
He also played Inspector Kemp in Young Frankenstein, so he was a big Mel Brooks recurring guy. And at the time that this was out, I think he was already on Malcolm in the Middle as well. Again, playing like a German guy. That was just his thing.
That's just his wheelhouse.
Yeah. Wow.
And right there, you hear these other two guys who it turns out, are going to be very important. This is the very beginning of the episode. It's all in media res. We didn't even send you our usual dossier because this doesn't concern most of our regular characters or locations, this trilogy. And it's just here's the story, here's where we're going to go. It's a lot more confident than I think the show has ever been.
Yeah,
truly. But it's a combination of like these grounded, down-to-earth performances and a cartoon character.
Yeah, and it starts very confidently and just expects you to sort of catch up, and then it spends the rest of its runtime explaining things to you.
It certainly does.
Yeah, he runs out of steam by, I don't know, halfway through part 2.
I would argue much sooner than that, but yeah.
Were you on board from the beginning of this, though, Kevin? I mean, were you like, okay, let's see what this shit's all about? Or were you already kind of like, I don't know?
I mean, Holstein's obviously over the top, but I do think that he's a good first impression in the sense of like, you know, there's a lot of energy here. He's like immediately charming. And I do like a mystery that just jumps right into it. So this opening scene does work for me. I will say that for me, the wheels come off immediately after that. Okay. So I like the opening, but then it gets rough.
Well, the mechanics of the next piece here to that point is that Katrina Shanks, we'll remember she's sort of our genius polymath, one of the two in this world, along with Eugene Meltzner, right?
Yes.
She works at the bookstore. And she's showed up to her shift, and she notices a rare first edition, a new book that's coming to the shop.
Oh, the first edition of the Hoggard book.
I beg of your pardon?
On the desk in the back, the first edition of the Eric Hoggard book.
Oh, yeah. I am excited beyond repair. One of perhaps 10 copies left in this country, and I found it. At no small cost, let me tell you one thing for sure. I phoned Professor Marcus to tell him it was in. He is as happy as a bird in a clamshell.
We're having a good time. We're having fun.
We're having fun. One of the cool things about this particular trilogy is that Josh actually managed to find a PDF of the script for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they published this in one of their
Kevin, you
books.
emailed me and you were like, hey, is there any chance that, and I was like, I don't fucking think so. But then I took a search and lo and behold, it's out there.
Yeah, it sure is.
And looking at, I was watching the script while I was listening to this, and I was continually fascinated by the places where they change lines. And I wonder if those are actor decisions or if those are in the moment writing decisions, because there are some exceptions to what I'm about to say. And I think there are things that they cut that aren't a good idea. But in general, I think especially with Holstein, when a line gets changed in the recording, it is significantly for the better.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of the like sort of weird idioms he uses are verbatim in the script, but there are points where he mixes it up a little bit. And I think it is always for the better. It's also incredible just to follow along with the script and to see like the large portions that they cut as well, because this thing already feels like it's very didactic and explanatory, but the fact that it was longer initially is wild to me.
Well, and it's interesting. I want to go into the directions as they're written here because they're not necessarily what you might expect, right? Katrina has come into the shop. She's gone into the back room. She looks at the book, and the stage directions are written like stage directions. It's, you know, Katrina comes in, Katrina goes to the back, Katrina comes back from the room. It's not anything dictating to the sound engineer, this is what I want you to do. It's all spatial, basically. When Jenny comes in a minute, it says Jenny enters with a cane to assist. Not we hear her cane tapping on the floor, we hear the door open. It's we know the door has to open, we know the chime has to play. It also leaves it kind of open as to what the chime is going to be so that John Campbell or whoever can design it. Right. And it's written as someone who is working with his sound team every day. They know each other. They work in the same place, and he can offload what he needs onto them because he knows that they'll be able to get the job done.
The one thing that I'll say is, you know, our scripts are up there and you can look at them and you can tell that I format everything incorrectly because we were making this up and now we've established a norm and I'm not going to change it. A key thing about sort of how Harley, the other creator of the Penumbra, and I work together is it's very, very cooperative. So a lot of the notes that I will write are notes directly to Harley. So I will often give extensive notes that are about physicality and space and things like that, and kind of trust Harley to make the call on whether these things make a noise that is forward enough for the audience to hear it.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
One of the things I find really interesting about the sort of directions in space in the script is, as you know, the three-parter goes on, you get fewer and fewer of these incidental sounds. By the end of it, this is just talking heads.
Yeah.
And sonically, that's incredibly dull, which is not helping everything else.
You may ask yourself, how did you find yourself in an abandoned construction site? Sorry, demolition site. That's going to be important later. But
this is not my beautiful book. This is not my beautiful knapsack.
That very normal American phrase that we all use, knapsack.
Also, AJ, you were obsessed as to finding out whether this Eric Hoggard guy was a real guy. Something that I never cared about at any point in my life, having listened to this.
Oh, the guy who wrote the book.
Hey, guess what? He's real, baby.
He's a real fucking dude. Not super significant author.
So he's a Danish writer who translated a lot of Hans Christian Andersen stuff, but also wrote a bunch of books about samurai.
Yeah.
I don't know why this was pulled. I don't know what this
still
is.
Alive at the time that this episode. He died in 2009. He's a contemporary author.
This is just Paul McCusker trying to show that he's a man of letters, right?
But for what?
He just really likes Eric Christian Hoggard, I guess.
Fuck if I know.
This is definitely something wrong with me, but I think that rules. That is my favorite thing I've heard so far. It feels lived in, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it is very specific. But
I just wonder if maybe they met each other and it's like a little joke about
nice little
his
Easter egg.
friend.
Shout out to my homie.
Yeah. I cannot imagine another reason. Yeah, I think he just saw that his middle name was Christian and went, oh, one of those, huh?
Yeah, a Dane.
Yes.
So
I'm more an antique Roman than that, personally.
Oh, okay, good to know.
Get out of here.
So what we learn about this book is that Holstein is going to hand deliver this edition to Professor Marcus. Now, this is the first mention of Professor Marcus. Professor
he's
Marcus
never appeared before.
is a professor. He's working on something important.
Yep.
One of the things that he's working on involves this book. This is going to pay off later on.
Yeah.
Now, another person who then shows up to the bookstore is Jenny. Now, Jenny, will remember, is a young girl who is blind.
Hello, Jenny.
Hi, guys.
Jenny, my little strudel, how are you today?
I'm okay.
Only okay?
Any changes I should know about?
A new book displayed to your left.
Got it, thanks.
What is this okay business? It is a beautiful day today. What is this okay?
Sorry, I got a little mad because everyone keeps treating me like I'm some kind of invalid. A woman nearly killed me trying to help me across the street just now.
Well, people mean well.
Yeah, nobody thinks that you are helpless.
But they act like I am. Just because I'm blind, they think I can't do anything for myself. I can. I walked all the way over here.
So this is sort of our reintroduction to Jenny, if we hadn't heard of her before. And yeah, she's blind. That's her entire character trait. That's like the one thing that we find out about her, pretty much.
She likes books, too, I think. That's the other... Yeah, I could not glean anything else from her.
Yeah, she's a big reader. She likes C.S. Lewis, like every evangelical kid of 9 years old.
One quick question. I don't know if this is brought up in previous episodes. Do we know anything about Jenny's history in terms of like, is this congenital? Is this the result of...
Yeah, there was an introductory episode where she like first moved to town and it was like, oh yeah, she's been blind for a long time, but like it's something that happened to her. One well-meaning idiot tried to like cure her of blindness using the TARDIS that he has in the ice cream shop, and it didn't work out. But otherwise, yeah, very normal town of normal people. And it was basically because since this is a radio drama, since in like 1995, it was the only radio drama at all in America, they had a lot of blind listeners. And so they decided to like write a blind character.
But they didn't give her anything to fucking do.
No, but most of the kids don't have anything to fucking do.
Well, I'm curious, Kevin, how this hit you. Because you said for you, the wheels fell off pretty fast. Was it here already that the wheels were starting to fall off? Or
I got suspicious here.
Okay.
Not
the
quite
exclamation point appeared above your head.
The Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
You threw the box over yourself. Yeah.
I'll say now that it's when the robbers kick into gear that I fall off. But I don't know. Like we do a lot of characters on our show that are disabled or of different identities that don't get represented in fiction a lot. And one of our rules is always like they got to have something going on, man.
Yeah.
Like your identity cannot be your entire life because you got a lot of time to fill. You must be doing something, right?
It's just her sitting in a room saying, I'm blind over and over and over again all day, which is not on camera.
It's her reading the Chronicles of Narnia with her mom.
How do you make sure that no matter where a character comes from, that they have some sort of an inner life?
This is sort of symptomatic as opposed to a core answer, but I find that if you aim for this symptom, you sometimes get to the core. And this does annoy some of our listeners, I'm going to be honest. Harley and I try to avoid any kind of I am statements about identity, right? Because once you strip that from a character that you are partially interested in because of their identity, they have to have other things to talk about. I can get into this in more detail with later scenes with Jenny.
Sure. Yeah.
But you start thinking about like, what's a person in this situation want out of life? What is a person who's listening to this? What have they not heard before or seen before from a blind character?
I feel like that happens pretty quickly here too, because suddenly the thing turns on its head, right? Bad news. These guys who are in the shop, well, they're not such normal guys. It turns out they've got a plan.
Thanks, Mr. Holstein.
Yeah, thanks.
Leaving so soon, gentlemen? Did you not find what you were looking for?
Actually, we're not leaving. We just need to lock the door for a minute.
Lock the door?
Oh, no. The law does not permit me to lock that door during business hours.
Well, we're not really interested in the law at this point. Open the cash register.
I'll get the you-know-what in the back.
Right.
What?
What's going on?
Go on, open the cash register and no one will get hurt.
What's happening?
I think we're being robbed.
What?
You are robbing my store?
Yeah, now quit stalling and open the, register.
And so this is a problem you can get into with radio drama, is that you can get too descriptive.
Yeah.
In old radio drama from like the 50s, it's someone like narrating each thing that they're doing. I need to go over to the window. I'm going to open the window now. And in Adventures in Odyssey, very often it's something happens and then a second character is like, why did you do that? Why did you go to the window? Why did you open the window? It's like slightly more sophisticated, but it also means that your character is really stupid. Like Katrina and Holstein are just standing there like, why did you lock the door? You can't do that. That's illegal. And these guys, for no reason, waited until the child entered the store and then they're like, we're gonna rob this now, instead of waiting for her to get the silver chair and leave.
And I think this comes back to what you were saying, Kevin, right? It's like, now how would Jenny actually respond in this situation? Because then they fucking kidnap her. But I feel like there's so little sense of like agency in what she wants from any of this beyond just like being in peril for the sake of convenience of the plot, right?
And they do end up trying to do some things with Jenny's experience that make her well suited to this situation. But to your point, when we open, she's pure victim.
I will say just like one point to Paul McCusker here is that she does walk into the store and say like, I can walk to the store by myself, right? I'm not a complete idiot, and I don't want people, you listeners of Adventures in Odyssey, to think that all blind people are incapable of simple tasks. You don't know what I'm capable of and what I'm not capable of, and you just need to listen to us. There is something of that there. It's just really, really thin.
I think her frustration could have been like bumped up a little bit, or like at the very least, it's immediately rebutted when she says, I'm not, helpless or whatever. I think Katrina says, well, people mean well.
And it kind of ends
and
it
it's
there.
Like,
yeah.
Okay, great. I'm so glad they meant well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There could have been a little bit more pushback there, but you can't push back against Milhouse Van Houten. He just
You sure can't.
I also just realized I forgot to grab a Milhouse clip for this week. So listeners, just put your own favorite Milhouse clip somewhere in this episode while you're listening.
We're going to leave some space here for you to put in your favorite Milhouse quote. Here we go.
Oh, that Milhouse.
So Jenny has been kidnapped, and now she's in the getaway car with the goons.
Oh no!
And this is what it sounds like.
And so we're gonna play this entire scene in the car, and you'll find out why later.
God,
must be rough going all the way to the bookstore just to get hijacked.
You
sure
should try
must.
it sometime.
I'm not real happy about this, This was supposed to be a simple job. A charge of kidnapping wasn't part of the, deal.
Don't blame me. She was insurance. How was I supposed to know we wouldn't be chased? Mr. Sauerkraut hadn't set off the alarm.
Never mind. Just check the stash, will you?
Yeah. Let's see what we have here.
Ooh.
How much money did we get?
Who cares? Here we go.
Is that it?
Looks like it. You gotta give him credit for knowing.
Open it and check.
Yep, it's what we were looking for.
Good.
Oh. This is a real hedgehog of a scene because there's so much going on sonically.
You know what they're doing? they're driving around at the speed of sound.
Wow, they got places to go. They're following their rainbows.
They are.
Why are we like this?
I don't know.
The rainbow takes them to a safe house.
Yes. So the whole of Jenny's kidnapping is 2 scenes.
Yes.
In the car and in the hideout. I didn't clip the hideout at all.
No,
I was
why would you?
Because I just wanted to take the car, and we'll see again. There was a reason for that, and I did edit a little bit of it out. There's a lot happening in these scenes to give you a sense of place, and a lot of times this is just taken as a given in Adventures in Odyssey. They put generally a lot into their scenes, into the action and the motion and the whoever is around, really setting up where a place is without having to have someone say, okay, we're at the hideout now.
Right.
I mean, in general, like, you know, I've been ragging on this a lot so far, but I will say that one of the things that I do think this does extremely well is that it is a good gateway to a specific variant of, you know, crime or mystery for kids, in the sense that the clues are really telegraphed. You can kind of see them coming from a mile away if you've experienced a lot of mysteries, but I can very easily imagine experiencing this for the first time and they are pushed to the fore enough that they jumped out to you at the time. And then when they come up again later, you feel really smart, right? And that's one of the thrills of a well-written mystery. I think that the setting here is done extremely well, actually.
Right, because there's all of these audio things that are going on just sort of in the sound bed underneath the scene that you will notice if you're, like you said, used to mysteries.
Yeah.
And you can probably already tell where the whole thing is going from the first 5 minutes if you know about that structure. But the reason that they're doing all of this, of course, is that once Jenny ends up having the opportunity to talk to the detective about the experience, she's going to be able to remember specific things about that audio. And that's exactly what happens. The bad guys drop her off at the police station, and then Jenny gets questioned by the police.
She's just shaken a little. We put out an APB on the pickup truck, but frankly, without more information, there wasn't much she could tell us, and she's blind.
This was your clip, AJ. This is one that you really wanted in here.
I think it's such a clear, like, okay, we could do that take again. Could you just know that the rest of the line is coming? Because you seem to really slip in the, and she's blind. Like, they're like really at the last minute. Like, it's like he thought the sentence was over. But then a very important part came up and he tried to play it off. Like,
it feels almost like, this is also Kenneth Mars, by the way. This is the same guy playing Holstein. It feels like he didn't want to say it. Like, he's like, the audience knows. We have said at least 7 times at this point that Jenny is blind. Like, I can finish the sentence earlier, and then you just see Paul McCusker in the corner just like waving his hand, like, get the rest of the sentence out, Kenneth.
just like highlighting through the page, and she's blind, and putting it up against the glass.
Yeah, pinning it against the wall with a knife.
Come on! But it is like Kenneth Mars seems to be like the actor who changes the most of his lines. To make them more lived in and more human is what I noticed. Like, there's a lot of like wells and like yeahs that he adds before like very strict sentence structure. And I think it's fascinating that there was that little bit of punch up that was happening seemingly in the room. Kevin, is that in your experience? Is that a thing that a lot of your actors do with your scripts as well? Like, is there a collaborative process?
In my ideal world, we would have a full cast rehearsal for every script, partially because something I really like to do is I like, especially for new characters, to hear the actors go at them and then adjust the voice in a way that works pretty well, right? One of our main characters in the fantasy series, Sir Mark, when he started off, his voice was very Cyrano de Bergerac. It was very like flowery and things like that. And the actor that we got in is extremely charming and fun to listen to, but in a much more kind of down to earth, honestly, kind of chaotic way. So
sure.
I ended up rewriting all of his lines for that first script to make it work. So we do that. We have certain characters that like they have vocal tics and mannerisms that were completely constructed by the actors, and then I start putting them in scripts. So yeah, I think that using what your actors are giving you and recognizing that 2 people working on a creative project together are always going to come up with something better than one person is a huge part of making this as good as you can make it.
Yeah, and a lot of what stylistic points Odyssey has in its favor come from the fact that they have money. They have the ability to, instead of have someone narrate something, they can tell the story through other characters because they can hire a couple other people at pretty cut rates. But, you know, and
especially
they
in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah. And they do sit everyone down in the same room. These are recorded the old fashioned way with everyone in the same room, like in the way that a live to tape show, like a sitcom would record. They rehearse a couple times and then they do it. You know, you do a few retakes here and there, but you're mostly just going through the whole story of the 20-minute episode scene by scene. And the results speak for themselves. And that's why they have these actors who are able to, apparently Will Ryan, who played Eugene, was always editing his lines, correcting factual mistakes or other grammatical issues that they had.
Well, here's the thing, right? You just heard in that last clip, that first cop really didn't know what to do with her. You know, she just wasn't that useful.
And she's blind.
But we have this brilliant lady detective, and she knows that, sort of like fucking Daredevil or whatever, Jenny's going to be able to like do greater things because her powers other than sight are so greatly magnified.
You're telling me that this detective is a woman?
It's crazy, right?
Detective Pat Ethan?
Oh, what? This is crazy. And it is so funny how it is treated as like this huge revelation. It's like, did you guys hear about this? Women are cops.
Also, this is Vaughn Taylor. She was the mom in McGee and Me.
Oh. Don't blame me. She was insurance. How was I supposed to know we wouldn't be chased? Mr. Sauerkraut hadn't set off the alarm.
Never mind.
This is familiar.
Just check the stash.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard this.
Yeah.
In its entirety.
Let's see what we have here.
Wait, Jenny.
What's wrong?
You've told us this much before. Now I want you to concentrate. Think details. Forget for a moment what they said. Think about the sound of the car, the sounds outside of the car.
I thought I was. I heard the sound of the motor, cars going by.
That's good. Keep going.
Okay. The motor, cars going by, and...
Don't blame me. She was insurance. How was I supposed to know we wouldn't be chased? Mr. Sauerkraut hadn't set off the alarm.
Never mind. Just check the stash, will you?
Yeah. Let's see what we have here.
A train.
This is pretty fun. Especially for a kid. Like, you're listening to this, it's getting very expressive with it. In the same way that, like, you watch an episode of Psych, and then Sean looks around the room, and then you see all the little glowing pieces of every clue that he finds. This is Jenny going back through her memory and isolating different sounds, and it's using the tools of audio production in a, rather than an invisible way as before, in a visible way.
Because she is, every time she references a new sound, that sound then comes in on the track, and that there's something very satisfying about
it's fun
to listen to.
It's like Salieri when he's talking about Mozart's music.
I guess I wish that the scene was better. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I have heard they play that clip so many times.
So much
sure
of it
do.
too. Like they could cut it down to shorter bits for sure.
There is a very real possibility that the last thought I will have before I die is, oh, if Mr. Sauerkraut hadn't pressed that alarm. And I hate you. I hate you for making that so.
Yeah, thanks for nothing, Brian.
I'm so torn on this part specifically because in terms of intro to mystery for kids, this is perfect. This is like, it's isolating things. It's showing you this is what you're looking for. And then they do develop on it later. And in general, the premise of this as a mystery in audio is really good. It's kind of genius. The big thing for me is, as I alluded to earlier, I think that the two goons are both in the writing and the performance so unbelievably the worst part of this entire thing.
Correct.
That being trotted through this god awful scene several times in a row is painful for me. It is difficult for me.
Like, even if they played it in a more cartoony register, there might be something to listen to, but it's just so like
well, and these two guys like are part of the Odyssey stable of actors, have done a few other episodes, but they're not actors. They're not people who have other credit. For some reason, that's another funny thing about Odyssey, where it's like, well, here's some pastor that we know, and then like that pastor's Australian child, and then also here are some of the funniest character actors who have ever lived.
Right.
Yeah, it is such a strange mix of it too. Yeah, I we didn't even talk about the part where one of the guys just like takes off his shirt in front of the kid, and it's like that's like a major plot
She's
point
blind,
of this.
AJ.
In case you forgot.
God, man.
And I think the reason for that is that it gave her the knowledge that there was a second room, which is not very useful, but it seemed useful for padding the time, I guess.
She remembers something else, too.
And I heard them digging around in the knapsack. I remember now. One of them found it, and the other said...
Is that it? Looks like it. You gotta give him credit for knowing.
Open it and check.
You gotta.
Yep, it's what we were looking for.
Good.
Give him credit. Give who credit?
God.
You think somebody hired them?
Possibly.
So now we know this is a die-hard situation. The robbery is fake, and it was all about, well, obviously, the Hoggard book.
Whoa! Okay, so here's a question I have for the group, because maybe I'm fully willing to admit that I'm wrong. The term knapsack was not one that was used where I grew up in San Diego.
Is that
backpack. Yeah, it's a backpack, right? Is there like maybe a section of America that uses knapsack that I'm just not aware of? Like, why is it just so that Holstein has to say knapsack later on?
No, genuinely, that's what I was going to say. I think it's just so that they could have Kenneth Mars say K-knapsack.
What a journey to walk.
Just to trace a couple more plot points here, we also learned that there's a getaway car. It turns out that getaway car belonged to Eugene.
Oh, wow. And after all that work he went through learning how to drive.
We get another fucking repetition of the, hey, it's a train for some reason.
Yeah, the train, the envelope, the train, the envelope.
God. And the only other thing that I wanted to note is that toward the end, Eugene notices that there's like this dirt on his car that he's not expecting.
Yeah.
The officer says, would you consider becoming like a member of the force? And Eugene's like, how much would it pay? And the cop's like, you couldn't afford the pay cut. So that's just interesting insofar as Odyssey has apparently defunded the police.
Yeah, because like Eugene...
Odyssey's gone woke!
Eugene is a full-time community college student who works part-time in the IT department.
What's going on?
And also works part-time at a soda shop ice cream parlor where he does not get paid well, but he gets paid at least twice as much as Connie. And like, he doesn't make good money. So the police are just like fucking living in cardboard boxes or something.
There are a lot of voices that pop up in here that like not to rag on them too much, especially if they're not actors, but they make the goons more and more depressing.
Yeah.
And these other really like intense and interesting and immediately captivating voices pop up.
Yeah.
The thing comes to life when Eugene shows up.
Yeah, it's like the goons and the cops are all just and Jenny's parents as well. It's like you can't blame a kid for just being a kid or whatever, but like there's a lot of really boring voice work going on in this three-parter, which to me I think just made it feel more adult when I listened to it as a kid.
Yeah,
so it felt very sophisticated. This was me getting culture by listening to
sophisticated,
not very exciting performances.
You know what else is highly sophisticated is when you go into somebody's dorm room and steal the physical backup discs for a very important document and also reformat their hard drive.
Yeah,
which is another thing that happened to Eugene, I guess.
That's what I do when I rob people.
Absolutely. So let's keep going, right?
Do it in two different places at once, baby.
We're on to part 2. Jenny remembers that safe house room again.
Yeah. And again, I just didn't clip stuff from the safe house. But what's interesting is they do change the format a little bit, which is less about Jenny recounting the same scene over and over again, although that's still there for some reason. It's more just like going outside of the dialogue part entirely and just listening to other sounds.
Just going to be very like straight up. By this point, the episode had fully lost me.
Yeah.
I was just like, I can't, there's another fucking episode and a half left of this shit. Like, fuck me. Kevin, I see you nodding. Were you in a similar place?
Yeah. I mean, Especially because, like, the reason I keep coming back to the goons, I know I gotta stop. The reason I keep coming back...
You're a gooner, Kevin. We get it.
Come on!
You're in good company.
You're in good company.
The reason I keep coming back to them is because they are a load-bearing part of this script in multiple ways. They're the hook. They are, like, the entire basis of the investigation. We keep on coming back to them because of Jenny's flash sideways. So, on a very basic level...
Speaking of Lost.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't even know just how I was doing that. It was a terrible idea on the production end to not honestly put some of your best voices as these two roles, because they are the face of the mystery for so much of this.
That's the whole thing too. And Kevin, like, you haven't listened to a lot of Adventures in Odyssey, so you're probably not as familiar with the massive stable of character actors that they could have used for this.
And it's even worse because all of this is masterminded by a guy who we don't even meet until part 3.
Yes.
So we get 2 scenes with him.
Like, who he is or what his deal is. Spoiler alert for the end of this fucking bullshit, but it turns out that Eugene's professor, under whom he has been researching...
The guy who wanted the Danish book.
Professor Marcus.
He's coordinating this entire heist so that he can steal Eugene's research and pass it off as his own so that he can get published in a journal and get tenure at the college.
Yeah.
It's insane! I was talking with my hands so hard there that I almost knocked over my water bottle. But like,
and listeners, it's a huge water bottle. Josh does not go small with water.
There's nothing in this setup that seems to be pointing in that kind of direction at all. You know, we get this fucking back and forth between Holstein and Harlow Doyle, the private inspector.
That's not in the script.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Harlow Doyle is not in the script.
Is this an improvised character interaction, maybe? I don't know. Let's listen to it.
Then what? So I said to the scoundrels, you must not lay a glove or any other foreign or domestic object upon this fair maiden's head. And they were so intimidated by my presence that I gave them that they hit me again and again until I had no choice but to fall on the ground. But they were not without their bruises, let me tell you that for nothing.
Mr. Holstein?
Excuse me while I assist this person that I have never seen before.
But Fred, if you never saw her before, how do you know it's her?
Oh my, that is an excellent question. I'll get back to you on that. Yes, how may I be of your help?
Like, that's just fun.
And not in the script, which is why you know it was fun.
Yeah, it's Holstein in the bookshop telling an unnamed customer this same story. And because Will Ryan plays Eugene, I guess he decided to do the Harlow voice here, because Harlow doesn't play a role in this doing some sort of botched investigation or anything. He's just hanging out with Holstein, hearing his battle tales.
Yeah, and they never refer to him as Harlow Doyle, but Kevin, just so you know, this is Odyssey's private eye, who is ridiculously bad at being a private eye, and thus is a very fun character to hang out with. Plus, he sounds like this.
I do have to say that the no foreign or domestic object will touch her line is genuinely incredible. I adored that.
Which is probably why it's not in the script.
Yep.
After we rehash the Eugene beat one more fucking time,
everybody has to be told, and we have to hear them get told.
We're back with Jenny, and we're learning more about what she heard.
Okay, Abraham Lincoln, you sit right there and be
She told them her name was Abraham Lincoln. Solid bit.
What do you hear?
A horn or something. I could hear it in the distance, like the kind on a big truck. And trucks driving back and forth. You know how they have that low rumble and the sound of gears shifting? And that beeping they make when they back up. Maybe bulldozers.
Go on.
Hammering. Definitely hammering.
What kind of hammering? Tack hammers, nails, jackhammering?
Pounding. Like chiseling. But maybe some jackhammering too.
A construction site. Is that what it sounded like?
Maybe. And there's one sound I can't figure out. Kind of like a woodpecker. No, a machine gun.
A machine gun? You mean like on TV?
Very different things.
Sort of. But more like the machine guns in those old gangster movies.
So I have a note here just as a director, right? Which is, where's the fucking tempo? this should be a discovery, right? Like, you know, she's remembering these things and there's something exciting about her remembering that. And so then the detective should be like, oh, wow, like, wait, and what else does that do? It's so fucking, oh my God. This episode pissed me off. Like, I'm really realizing just how irritated I was by it because it's so flat.
This just turned you into J.K. Simmons and you're just throwing symbols at them.
Another one of Michigan's finest. Like, just fucking sits there like a fucking dead fish. And I'm like, do something.
But it's still, I don't know, it's still interesting enough. It was interesting enough for me to remember this from my childhood. I mean, of course, I remember most of these episodes from my childhood because I'm not well. But like going through these sounds, I think there's just something that's really expressive about it, even though, yes, you're right, Josh, it's too slow. It doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. The description of that final tool, which is the thing that cinches everything up later, is not quite like, it doesn't sound like a woodpecker at all.
It doesn't sound like a machine gun or a woodpecker.
I think it sounds like a machine gun. But I don't like the, like on TV? No, like in the movies. What the fuck does that mean?
Sometimes it feels like he's just got to fill time.
No, it really is. It's like comparison TK, and then he forgets to fill it out.
So it's really funny that like he obviously like sat down with Dave Arnold and their Foley guys and was going through their library and being like, okay, what things can I pick out?
Yeah.
Okay, this one. And they probably had different folders for construction site and demolition site. And that's where he was able to get some kind of piece. But again, that's collaboration. That's finding out what tools you have by working with people regularly.
One of the things about playing in sci-fi and fantasy specifically, right, is that sound is inherently world building. And a thing that I think about a lot in writing in general is that, you know, whether it's a sound description or a piece of dialogue or whatever, ideally you want every sentence to be doing more than one thing. This is both for tone and it's world building. This is character and it's plot, right? And I think that balance is really significant. So I do actually really like the building out of the soundscape for this place. It makes me wish that the place had been more significant earlier in a sense, almost like emotionally significant, because we get there and we learn all the things about it, and that's neat. That makes the mystery tick, right? But it doesn't. To kind of to some of your points about the pacing of the reveal, there's nothing about it that hits me. There's nothing about it that makes me like stop mentally and go like, I need to be paying attention now.
And something that I just thought of too is that maybe to the point of framing up what that thing was, they make it so clear throughout the first part that Jenny is in no real danger whatsoever. And I think that the lack of anything even approaching danger really defangs the setting up of that space.
Yeah, it's very low stakes. It's like nothing happened. And there's something kind of fun, I think, in like the way the first scene is built, where it's like nothing seems all that important and then it comes back and it's important, but you can't do that for like the whole first 10 minutes.
Yeah, because it's also not like Adventures in Odyssey is unwilling to put children in peril.
No.
Like, for fuck's sake.
They sent a kid to hell.
They captured the children with Jezebel, that adventure where they like had her about to human sacrifice them on an altar.
Yeah. Or even in real life outside of the imagination station.
Yeah.
Remember when those kids got caught and then one of them got beat the fuck up?
Or the time that the kids helped birth the baby Jesus, which the implications of that rack my mind.
It's not an actual time machine, AJ. It's a simulator.
But it's virtual Jesus. And what if virtual Jesus becomes cognizant of his surroundings?
I don't know, AJ.
Why would he do that?
What happens? What happens that? You tell me. What happens in that situation, AJ?
They're conscious AI, right? So it has to. That is the end point.
No.
Yeah, they're able to have
conscious.
conversations without the kids there.
No.
They're self-aware. They're able to react to every single input, and you're telling me those things aren't alive.
You can put one chat
telling me those
online
things aren't
with
alive.
another chat bot, and they can talk back and forth. They are not alive, AJ. They're in fact...
They're
alive, and they're my friends.
They're just actually
they're my only friends.
Lines written on a script played by actors. I don't know how to say this, AJ, but when you were in that show with Paddington, actually I do know how to say that. He wasn't alive either.
That's where you're wrong. That's where you're wrong. We hung out backstage.
There were
and he was my
people.
Friend.
That's why his voice kept changing every night, because they were switching out who did the voice.
Nope. It was just a bear. It was a bear who was my friend and stared at me with his cold black eyes.
It turns out,
yes,
okay, that the site that Jenny was at is in fact a demolition site.
Yeah. Not a construction site. Wow. And there's only 3 demolition sites.
And so they're able to go and like find who is doing a demolition in the county by pulling permits or looking at who pulled permits. And, they go and they find the site. That's very exciting. Meanwhile, Eugene sort of has his part to play because he still has nagging questions.
Yeah.
It is maddening. What was on this computer? Why would the culprits bother to steal my laptop and disks and then erase everything on my main computer? And what does it all have to do with the robbery at Holstein's bookshop?
What indeed?
Are the nagging questions.
He stares dead into the camera.
Yeah, he's not having this conversation. He's talking to Katrina, and it's like that. She didn't ask.
And we also get some really thrilling highlights of like interacting with bureaucracy and then going to the demolition site.
Yeah.
And the way this is written is so cracked.
Right. I don't care how you do it, you have to stop them. I'm going out there with my men right now. Jurisdiction, forget it. Just stop those workers until we get there.
What?
Bureaucrats.
Well,
come on. That has got to be the
I'm
place.
imagining him like
3
moving his arms
buildings,
like
the
Dean
old factory,
Lerner.
an office building and an apartment building used for the immigrant workers from the factory. All built around the turn of the century. They knocked down the office building last week. They finished the factory off last night.
Last night?
The apartment building is coming down today.
Their hideout is in the apartment building.
Our boys were real smart. They figured the building with any evidence would come down before we'd find it.
That's an interesting dynamic with a lot of history. It's a shame it wasn't part of the episode.
Yeah, Kevin, exposition masterclass. Am I right?
It is a wall of information that I can't even begin to scale. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
The reason they found out it was a demolition site was because when Jenny was like, what's this machine gun sound? They were like, they sent their rookie who had lines for some reasons to go to the local radio station because normal radio stations would have just a huge sound library, the likes of which only Focus on the Family is in possession of in 1995. And they have her go through sound discs, which is interesting because Adventures in Odyssey at this point had only just started producing all of their episodes digitally instead of listening to queued up tapes.
This is something about Focus on the Family in general, though, and Adventures in Odyssey specifically. There are always mentions of technology.
Mm-hmm. There is a move that happens at the end of part 2 that I think is really, really smart, mystery-wise. I think it really hangs together. The fact that, they investigate the demolition site and the book and the money are both there.
Right.
I do think that's really smart. It is part of because, to an extent, I think that all fiction writing is like this, but I think mysteries especially like this. There's a lot of common DNA between mystery writing and performing a magic trick, I think, in the sense that in both cases, the trick itself is happening in the audience's mind. These people aren't real. Sorry, AJ, they're not. Neither is Paddington. They're not real.
I'm gonna need to call in my parents from the other room.
But you can trick the audience momentarily into thinking that they are, and that's the game, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, sort of, I think the rhythm of a really interesting and compelling magic trick is the magician tells you ahead of time, I'm going to show you something impossible. And your reaction as the audience is, all right, bet. Like, I don't think you are.
Yeah.
And then you see it and you're kind of tricked into it. So this is a hook for this arc of the mystery being like, look, this wasn't even a robbery. They say this and I go, I don't think you're going to pull that off. Whether or not they do is a different consideration, but as a hook,
listener, they don't. Just gonna throw that out there. They don't, but
yeah, they faceplant pretty hard.
Yeah, but I guess my point is that half of it is it's the promise, and then it's fulfilling the promise.
Yes.
The art of making the promise is an art, and it is compelling. If you don't fulfill the promise, it completely blows up in your face. And I think that's what happens here.
Well, and I think that, like, to the point of things being connected, there is the connective tissue of like the Eugene B plot. And we are, I think, all sort of being like, okay, we know these things are going to be connected. They're very clearly setting it up. But how are they going to be connected? Which is an interesting, dramatic question. Now that we know that there's a bigger mystery afoot than just a standard burglary, Eugene and Katrina come by the precinct to get Katrina's bag, which again was at the scene. And it turns out that there's this little bit of an envelope in it. Now, not the whole envelope, just a little corner of an envelope. They've also found a fingerprint at the hideout that's going to allow them to do some analysis. And Eugene realizes now that Dr. Marcus, the guy who we've heard almost nothing from, is in fact the sort of central fulcrum of this mystery. And Kevin, at this point, I'm wondering where your head was at with regard to Dr. Marcus.
I like the performance. I like the performance of Dr. Marcus. And partially because I like the performance, he was 3 words in and I was like, God damn it, this is the guy. Like, this is very clearly the guy.
Yeah.
And I genuinely think that you could improve this entire thing by leaps and bounds if you cut the goons. I can't shut up about them, but just cut the goons.
They gotta go.
Put Dr. Marcus in the first scene with like a disguise and a voice changer and just have him be the one doing the crime.
Absolutely.
He has the personality. He has and he's threatening. There are stakes there. In a way that there's nothing with the goons. They're completely toothless.
We take those goons, we put them in a cave, and we let them do whatever goons do in a cave.
Come on. Dr. Marcus is the guy. He's so clearly the guy. But Eugene thinks that he's actually the victim. He thinks that he's in great danger. And so he goes to warn him, you know. The cops figure out who the primary suspect is, which is one of the goons. He's in Connellsville, naturally, because that's where all of the crime happens.
Yeah, they mentioned Odenton again, too. It was like, we forgot about the North Haverbrook of the Adventures in Odyssey.
And North Haverbrook, This guy asks for his lawyer immediately, but then he keeps blabbing, which allows Jenny to ID him based on his voice. Eugene is going to save the day by helping Dr. Marcus out. But of course, Dr. Marcus has been playing him like a fool for the whole time. And eventually there's a nice little setup, you know, a moment of like, oh, you're busted. Did you find this to be fun, Kevin, when they busted the guy?
Eugene doing the sting?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that like one of the great shames of Dr. Marcus is that when he shows up, you go like, oh, I get it. Like, this is the story. It's just you weren't showing me the story. You were putting the camera at these other people doing whatever, and I don't know why I was watching that.
Also, The Great Shames of Dr. Marcus sounds like a literary classic.
It's my favorite silent film.
Marcus actually has a vocal performance that I find very fascinating because when you read along with him what he's actually saying, he tends to skip lines and then combine them back together in a very fun and interesting way. It does not seem to me, and again, this is entirely speculation, it does not seem to me to be an intentional choice. It seems to be him misreading it and then sort of fudging his way through it. But if you're not reading along with the script, it sounds natural. It sounds like this guy's like really got like a full control over it, and it's thrilling in a way that like most of this episode is not.
I didn't clip him. Notice I didn't clip basically anything from the 3rd episode because, like you said, Kevin, before, it's just everyone in quiet rooms talking to each other one-on-one, basically.
What's really interesting, too, looking at the script is starting in episode 2, but it's hardcore in episode 3, they start cutting out massive chunks of script that are exclusively about the mystery. So by this point, they have kind of given up on the idea of the mystery being the tension propellant, like bringing us through the story. At one point, there is an entire page where Detective Ethan is like explaining how the clues that were set up earlier matter. And it's just gone.
Does it need to be there? It probably doesn't need to be there, right?
No. And so this is actually part of why, you know, before we started talking about the episodes themselves, I was curious about what the priorities of this genre of storytelling are, right? Because it's easy for me to look at this and say, as a mystery, this isn't working. But then I get to something like that and I start to think maybe that's not even what it's trying to do. And I should at least try to evaluate it on its own terms, right? Like what are the goals of this thing?
Well, what do you think the goals of this thing are?
That's where I'm lost. I'm going to be honest with you. And it's partially because I hope, honestly, this is maybe naive of me, but I hope that it's because I don't understand the genre, that I'm lacking some sort of content understanding in order for me to get this.
So we get to the end and we realize we just have to explain a bunch of stuff, and then they explain even more than that. It's like the final scene in Psycho, and you'll see exactly what I mean when I start playing it, because Detective Clarissa is about to explain it all.
I'm in shock. I still refuse to believe that a man of Dr. Marcus's stature would be involved in such an escapade.
And I appreciate your feelings, Eugene, but he was not only involved, he masterminded most of it.
But he's a highly esteemed scholar.
It's because he's a highly esteemed scholar that this happened, Eugene. Dr. Marcus was up for tenure at the college.
Excuse me, Detective. Would you explain tenure to the younger members in your audience?
Tenure is something that most college and university teachers want. It's like a permanent contract that guarantees them good pay and job security.
So if they get it, they can't be fired?
Well, something like that, yes. And it puts them in line for big promotions and prestige. If you're a teacher, it's one of the most important things you can have. But Dr. Marcus hadn't fulfilled an important requirement to get it. He hadn't written a substantial article for a reputable academic journal. Enter Eugene Meltzner.
I can't believe it.
Dr. Marcus had sponsored Eugene's work and insisted it be kept secret. You didn't tell anyone what you were working on, did you, Eugene?
No.
And since Eugene trusted him completely...
This is about a quarter of the explanation, so I just cut it off right here. Jenny saying that line, as a kid, I always interpreted exactly like that, Josh. It was, we turn to the camera now. It's almost like they're all standing on a stage and the set has been moved off and they're the curtain is halfway closed.
This is just Brecht.
But now I'm realizing, listening to it as an adult, Paul McCusker thought he was just putting a really sly, urbane comment in Jenny's mouth. When she's saying for the younger members of our audience, she just means herself.
Right.
But it's such a miscued line that it sounds like they've just completely shut down and they're like, we are talking to you.
Yeah, the fourth wall is just gone.
Even with Eugene responding to the cue with I can't believe it. That was Maxwell Smart. That was not Eugene Meltzner. That was Inspector Gadget.
This really gives the game away of what the overarching thing is. And Kevin, the piece that you feel that you're missing from the genre, what it's going after, is petty grievances.
Yeah.
What this is about is Paul McCusker feeling intellectually cucked by the academic institutions at large, and he's going to get back at him saying, well, they don't even write their own papers. They just steal shit from their students and pass it off as their own work because they can't come up with their own stuff because that would make them smarter than me.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right, AJ. I maybe it's a little more nuanced than that, but not by much.
I think it's in a way less nuanced. I think it's more that this was the first draft. I think that's what really boils all this down, is that he had a bunch of ideas, but he never actually did a draft that put them in a sensible place.
Okay, but the fact that this would even be an idea is buck fucking
I know,
wild.
for a children's show to make it about tenure of all fucking things.
I mean, it's just completely disconnected from the story that we were pitched at the beginning.
Yeah,
that's the big thing, right? And so one of the big things about managing audience expectation, and I do think you see this with a lot of long-running series, right? Where even if the series remains really good throughout, if, say, season 1 begins with a promise and then season 2, 3, whatever opens and it's explicitly not fulfilling that promise, you're going to disappoint people, right?
Like Lost?
Like Lost, or even, it was garbage anyway. I finally read it as an adult, but this is the reason that when I was a kid and I was prime age for the Harry Potter books as they were coming out, I get to the end of the 6th book. They say, we're not going to school next year. And I say, neither am I. And I never read the 7th
Really?
one.
Wow.
I just didn't care.
Same, exact same here. Yeah.
Wait, Josh, you never read the 7th book?
No,
either?
And I have no desire to. I mean, I super duper have no desire to now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Even back then, I was like, this is not, we're not paying off the thing that was set up. It's just...
I didn't read it because it glorified the devil and his ways.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah, sure. I will say they do go to school at the end. And there's a lot of camping in between.
I pirated it last year to read it so I didn't have to give her money. But so don't read it. It's not worth it. But the most infuriating part is they go to school at the end and they find out what everybody else has been up to at school. And you're like, man, why wasn't I here?
Yeah.
This is way better than what we were doing.
It genuinely sounds really cool. What was happening? Yeah.
Here's the thing. The next thing that we're going to be talking about kind of has a lot of that same structural issue of we're going to hear a lot about things that have happened without actually seeing them happen.
And I am so excited because this really delves into the psyche of Paul McCusker in a way that he kind of has to keep the mask a little more on for Odyssey. But this is adult fiction now. Recommended for, let me just check my notes, 15 and up, baby.
Yeah. So stay tuned for some hardcore adult content right after this.
To the Goon Cave.
I remember the day my world ended. You were standing in the corner of the room at some terrible orientation party, where the snack table had a vegetable platter with no dip, and a single banner that read, "Welcome, Class of 1906, which momentarily made me think I had forgotten how numbers work. Just paint an 8 on the end. How hard is it to make a banner? I was mere moments from putting down my cup of lukewarm lager and abandoning hope entirely, but then there was you, alone in the corner, swirling a glass of red wine like you actually knew something about red wine, and wearing a 3-piece suit complete with pocket watch and chain that you kept fiddling with absent-mindedly. A 3-piece suit to a freshman year mixer. I mean, who does that? I don't believe in love at first sight, but I do believe in intrigue. And you, my friend, intrigued me. You were studying the banner intently when I approached, and I asked what it was like to be part of the graduating class of 1906. You shrugged and said, well, the harvest is plentiful, and Septimus Severus is a pretty good Caesar, all things considered. Shame about him trying to kill Claudius Albinus, though, I replied. You smiled. Electric. My, a fellow student of history. We're a dying breed, you and I. I told you I was a fine arts major, actually. You told me you were in theology. I guess we both hate money, I said. We laughed and talked, and before I knew it, the party faded away, and it was just you and me on the quad, laying in the cold grass, staring up at the stars. You asked me if I believed in God. I said I wasn't sure. You smiled and said I was lucky. Those who doubt always ended up having the strongest faith. What do I call you? You asked. Nick Nicaea, I said. Well, Nick Nicaea, my name is Karen J. Wyatt, and I'm going to save the world. And you want to know the worst part? I actually believed you. The clock ticked behind you. That fucking clock always in the background. You said it helped you think. A metronome to give the chaos order. Tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock. It's good, you said. Really good. I beamed. I hated how much I craved your approval. And will it work? Theoretically, I said. The guys down in R&D seem to think so anyway. Mary's over the moon for it. You studied the design. You always looked at every piece of paper like you were trying to burn a hole through it with your mind. The interns whispered that you secretly did have that power, but I knew better. I knew what you were doing. You were looking for flaws, and I knew there weren't any. The sequence is to my exact specifications, to the minute, yes. All right, you said. Get it done. I nodded and turned to leave. Nick, I turned. I appreciate the work. The work. Did you know? Even then, sitting in your golden tower, staring out at the world you wished to build, did you know what it would cost? And the question that keeps me up at night, the question that gnaws at my mind and claws at my soul is, did you care? I remember the day I found your little notebook and all your little sketches, your designs, your plans. I stormed into your office, Christina hot on my heels. You waved her away. Your eyes locked on the notebook. The door shut behind her. Tick, tock, tick, threw it on your desk. Provenance, Odyssey, Odenton, sites for 3 new stations. Do you have any idea what kind of danger you're putting those people in? The danger you've put us all in after what happened during the test, after what happened to Mary. What is wrong with you? You sat in silence, trying to burn a hole in my head. Answer me, Karen. You took off your silver glasses and you looked old. For the first time, I saw the years pile up and I felt pity in spite of myself. Patmos owns the rights to the machine, you said. We can do with it as we please. For the good of the company. For the good of the world. Fuck the company. Fuck the world. What about me? You stood up from behind your desk, your fingers coiling around the edges, your eyes burrowing into mine. You've doubted for so long, Nick. Since the first day I met you, you've been plagued by doubt, hounded by it. It must be exhausting. But now, at long last, I'm asking you to take a leap of faith. Because if you do this, if you trust in me, I promise you, you will never doubt again. Please. Your voice had changed, but your eyes hadn't. And I realized for the first time that all those years ago, when you first saw me at that party, you had found a flaw in me, and you exploited it. You used me. And what's worse, I liked it. I craved it. I've wasted my life in the service of a monster, but that doesn't mean I can't make it right. I remember the day my world ended, Karen. But you, my friend, will never forget the day I end yours.
All right, everyone. So just to survey the room, no one has ever heard the thing that we're about to talk about today before this week.
Only in the sense that you have been bugging me about it forever.
Yeah, okay.
It's been on the list for a very long time. I originally thought that Father Gilbert was the sequel to Gerbert.
Yeah.
But in fact, two very different.
It's Gerbert all grown up.
In
Father
Japan,
Gilbert
they
Mysteries.
sold it as a sequel to Gerbert because of the similarities and the consonants there. Focus on the Family in the mid-90s was like, okay, we got McGee and me done. We've been rolling with Adventures in Odyssey. Let's expand this. Let's make this bigger. They still really wanted to be a media producer. Nothing had really, nothing took, really. They wanted the cartoon to get like a real producer. It never really happened, but they kept producing more of the cartoons of Adventures in Odyssey.
And just to sort of connect this to our last Wits Endless Summer, they had a lot of capital to make this stuff happen because the Bundy tape raised the profile of both James Dobson, the founder, and focused the organization so much that a whole bunch of people came in and started contributing a lot of money to their organization.
We don't have all of their tax documents going back to the 80s, but it looks like the late 90s are when Focus on the Family has the most revenue.
They had money that they could spend on perhaps some more pet projects of some of their writers of Adventures in Odyssey.
So they decide to expand out, and I think a lot of this was spurred by Paul McCusker himself, because Paul McCusker is living in the UK, and a lot of this production happens in the UK. They make another radio show called Focus on the Family Radio Theater with an R-E. So it's fancy. Ooh. And Adventures in Odyssey was not the beginning of their radio drama antics, right? They did some other radio dramas that weren't necessarily kid-oriented. We listened a long time ago with our friend Ash Stoneman to Tilly, Frank Peretti's bizarre abortion parable.
And Kevin, if you are wondering, yes, there are ghosts in that one.
Yes.
I have so many questions that I can't ask them without completely derailing.
No, please.
Well, my first one is what?
Yeah. Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Abortion parable with ghosts.
The ghost of the fetus.
So the idea, but it's all grown up.
It comes back. Yeah.
It's not all grown up. It's like
it's a child.
4.
and it comes back to haunt the woman who aborted, who had the abortion.
So it's a Rugrats situation, not a Rugrats all grown up situation.
No, but Irv Immerman, who played the professor in the last episode, was in Rugrats All Grown Up.
What?
Yeah. Radio theater is then kind of going back to that. It's like, we don't want to just write things for kids. We want to be able to spread our wings and fly. And so we will do books on tape. We will do original dramas and things like that. So in 1996, in November of 1996, Paul McCusker writes an adaptation of A Christmas Carol.
I've heard this one. It's pretty good.
Okay, I don't think I have, but it seems like it would be. So they put that out. Then in 1997, they put out a radio drama about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and that wins a Peabody Award for sound design.
Whoa!
We got some reputation going here. All of the good, or like all the best radio theater dramas were written by a guy named Philip Glassborough.
I love his music.
I know. I love the idea that it's Philip Glass working under a pseudonym.
He's dodging the union.
Philip Glassborough, he's written a few like BBC4 radio dramas and things like that. So he wrote adaptations of Les Miserables. That was one that I remember listening to as a kid. It's
I've heard that one too.
Very good.
Yep.
It definitely leans a lot more on the priest at the beginning and the Christianity, but that's all there in the story, right? So it makes sense, whatever. He also does an adaptation of Silas Marner, which in my memory is maybe the best thing they ever put out. Later, radio theater they're like, oh, we need to cast somebody famous in this. We'll do the Screw Tape Letters with Andy Serkis and Bertie Carvel.
Really?
Yeah. The whole thing ends in 2013 when McCusker leaves Focus on the Family. Their biggest hits were the Chronicles of Narnia series. I don't know if they got famous. I haven't listened to those, but they had a room over at the Whit's End in Colorado Springs for Chronicles of. You could walk through a wardrobe and just see
it had like two dinky things up
it
on
had
the
a
wall.
picture of Aslan. It was awful.
The best way to describe it was like if you ever went to DZ Discovery Zone, it felt like one of the private back rooms that they used for birthday parties.
That's exactly right.
That they did not clean or maintain in any way.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So don't go to Focus on the Family, folks. It's a bad place.
So Les Mis, the one that I remember listening to, which I think we got when it was new on tape, a big box of tapes. That was produced in 2001. Also produced in 2001 was Paul McCusker's own Father Gilbert Mysteries. The episode we're going to be listening to today is an episode called Dead Air. It is the third Father Gilbert mystery. The first three were released together in 2001. All the way until 2013, there were about 10 Father Gilbert mysteries produced in total. And in 2016 and 2018, I think, McCusker published 2 books about Father Gilbert. If you go to Goodreads, they have very low ratings because the people reading them were like, it was too dark and scary. I don't really like it when there are demons in stories.
I was curious, by the way, when you mentioned that, if it was Focus who published it, and no, it was not.
No, he left Focus on the Family in 2013. I guess he carried the copyright or got the blessing from Focus on the Family to keep working on Father Gilbert without them. Paul McCusker now works for something called the Augustine Institute, which is a Catholic group in Colorado Springs, and writes extended radio dramas about saints. They're all about the saints.
It looks like these were published by an imprint called Lion Fiction, like the big cat. I have no idea if that's
Josh just did
anything.
a little swipe, like a little paw when he said lion. Obviously, this is a takeoff of classic detective novels. You always want to have a detective who has a thing going on, right? He's always got to have a quirk. And so what if the quirk was he's a priest? G.K. Chesterton thought this up in 1910 with Father Brown. It's been a very popular character over in the UK. There was a Father Brown TV series in the 70s or the late 60s, whatever, same thing. And there's a Father Brown series that's been running since 2012 and is currently running today. There have been other priests. Tom Bosley played a priest who solved mysteries. There have been monks that solve mysteries, of course. But, Chesterton was getting in the priest mystery game first. And he was basically, instead of doing Sherlock Holmes, he was kind of going off of the original detective novels by Edgar Allan Poe, Monsieur Dupin, where he kind of talks people into confessing. A lot of times the mysteries in a Father Brown story won't even happen until the midpoint, and then someone dies, and then it's like, oh, okay, let's figure out what all this is.
Well, and Kevin, I've got a question for you here because, you know, in the first half, we talked about something that is a sort of watered down baby's first mystery, and very intentionally so. Whereas with Father Gilbert, Paul McCusker was really trying to, you know, do real gritty, like
advanced
hardcore.
level.
Yeah. And first of all, I'm just kind of curious, like, to hear about your background beyond, you know, Penumbra with mystery, like as a genre. What has that looked like for you?
When I was a kid, I my mother watches murder mysteries obsessively. It's just about the only thing she watches.
Okay.
So it was just like always in the background for me. Poirot especially.
Okay.
And, I've seen all of Monk several times at this point. So the kind of beats of that are in me. And then, I never really intended to write mysteries actually when I started writing, but one of the things that I did after a while, after I'd written a couple novels and I was like, these aren't working and I don't know why they're not working and I want to figure it out, was I started trying to study the page turner. I sat down with in the books that I picked up to do this were mostly like some of the noir classics, a lot of Raymond Chandler, a lot of Dashiell Hammett.
Any Agatha Christie or more on the like heavy noir side?
I started on the heavy noir side.
Okay.
I have since studied some Agatha Christie and tried to figure out how she works. It's funny that they're both in the same genre because in a lot of ways they don't share much common tissue in terms of
that's kind of what I was wondering. Yeah.
One of the things that I think is really compelling about noir and is weirdly, despite the fact that aesthetically this mystery, that Dead Air, feels more like an Agatha Christie, it is attempting to run on the engine of something like noir. And noir specifically descended from like pulp adventure novels, right? And the way that I've kind of tried to conceive it over time is a lot of mysteries, they want you to be able to make educated guesses about what's going on over the course of the story. More or less, most classic noir doesn't give a shit. It doesn't care if you can make those guesses. It is an adventure story where the treasure the hero receives after each encounter is information. And that is the engine it runs on. It is a series of escapades where you are rewarded with information and you compound that information into a conclusion that leads to the next thing. That's the attempt here.
Yes. It is an attempt.
Yeah.
And we will talk about the various swings that it makes and whether or not it hits. But I guess we might as well just start at the top here, right?
It's really important to know that like your detective in this classic Conan Doyle, Edgar Allan Poe, Agatha Christie way is going to be the smartest guy in the room, whether he has quirks or not. McCusker forgot to write any quirks here, but Gilbert remains the smartest and also, in this case, most virtuous person in the room.
I would argue that believing demons are real is kind of a quirk. It's just that McCusker...
No, demons are real.
But it's also, and they're my friends. But McCusker does not believe this to be a quirk. And that is pretty, I think, a huge fundamental failing of this is not realizing how weird your protagonist is.
This is more just like, I am going to write something that is very serious that also talks about the very real issue of spiritual warfare. We talked about this again, just to bring up Frank Peretti again, and those books that we talked about. The idea of spiritual evil being an honest-to-goodness corporeal presence, that's at the core of this thing. And we even hear it a little bit up top. We get like a sizzle reel to kick us off for some reason.
Yeah, they do the little
with this
montage
one.
that they do with Adventures in Odyssey, where you just have the hot lines from the episode.
This sounds like what plays before a knockoff DVD of like The Hunchback of Notre Dame, but they had to change it.
It's like not Amblin Entertainment, it's like Omblin Entertainment, and it's a kid on a skateboard in front of the moon.
It's the Hunchback of Ulm.
Yeah, this is this is like an imitation of a song. I don't know how else to say it. It feels like it's a pastiche.
It doesn't get there.
It's like John Campbell is doing a parody of himself. It's also like Father Gilbert has kind of its own theme song that sort of shows up as a motif for like scene changes that sounds like the Close Encounters of the Third Kind theme.
Well, yeah, and we get two guys sitting around to kick us off.
listening to Citywide Radio, and we're back with Live Wire, the chat show that boldly goes where no other chat show dares to go. I'm William Barry, and my guest, if you're just joining us, is, well, he's a bit unusual, really. A former London police detective who's now an Anglican priest in the tiny village of Stonebridge. Father Louis Gilbert.
That sure is who he is.
Why are they interviewing this guy? Why are they interviewing
Have you ever watched
Father Gilbert?
any show about a priest? The priest always gets on the radio at some point. It's true of Father Brown. It's true of the Tom Bosley one. It's true of Father Ted.
But it's like, it's supposedly like a chat show with like interesting people just like around.
Yeah, he's a homicide
town?
detective who became a priest. That's interesting.
This is an extension of the issue that you were saying with Father Gilbert in general, that he doesn't have a thing.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a person. The show doesn't have a personality either, right? Like, what's the hook for this talk show?
It's controversial.
Yeah, but I know that not all writers agree with this, but I'm very much of the opinion that, like, if you've got a random cashier who has 3 lines in a scene, you should know the cashier's name, right? Like you don't need to know literally everything, but everybody has to be a person.
Mm-hmm.
And this talk show host, as a person who has created this property, I don't know anything about him, which is embarrassing because I had to sit through his work for like what felt like 20 minutes and was probably 5.
And he ends up being somewhat more important than he seems, because he's not just the exposition factory. He has a thing that comes back towards the end of this mystery.
Mm-hmm.
But
right, he is the fulcrum on which this whole thing turns.
What I will say,
shockingly,
on one technical note, they do a fun little thing as it's going from you're hearing the radio show on the radio to hearing it inside the studio, is that there's an in-between point. It doesn't just fade from one sound to the other. It goes to a second little point that's almost like you're traveling through the wire itself until you're finally in the studio. I just wanted to give that dead-eyed freak Dave Arnold a couple little points there.
Well, this is the thing about the sound design of all of this. It's really quite sophisticated. Yeah. It's just in service of these really bizarre scripts.
Deeply. Paul McCusker needs us to know about this. He needs us to know about it. The first episode is about a guy who Father Gilbert overhears talking about, like, how he's going to murder somebody. And then it turns out Father Gilbert dreamt that he talked to this guy, but it's a real guy. And at the end of the whole thing, there is no murder that's about to happen, but it turns out that his ex-girlfriend is pregnant. And it could have been, if he hadn't gotten back with her at the end, she would have had an abortion.
What?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
my God.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't you understand? I love this shit.
Yeah, I can see why. I can see why. This is...
If I hadn't listened to Dead Air, I would have assumed that you made all that up, like, on the
Right? Yeah.
Oh my God.
And to the point of like how Paul McCusker needs you to know about things. He's not able to be fully explicit about what the thing is, even to a more mature audience, because of the sensibilities of that audience. And I think we hear this in the next clip.
Did you find the girl?
Yes, we did. Unfortunately, by the time we found her, she was already caught up in the sleaze and drugs of that area.
Yeah, but wait a minute, though. During the last break, you told me that you don't really consider the girl a runaway.
Well, no. I think she was lured into a trap.
What kind of a trap?
Well, you have to understand, this girl was no ordinary runaway. In fact, she was a very sweet and innocent girl. She came from a loving Christian family.
So you think?
So I know. I dealt closely with the girl's parents. I saw firsthand what they were made of, how much they loved their daughter, what their faith meant to them. It was their faith during that terrible ordeal that made such an impression on me.
So what Gilbert is talking about here is the last case that he had as a detective, the one that made him finally leave the force and become an Anglican priest. It's establishing a couple of things. One, it's showing who his monk's wife is. This is the thing that has been haunting him for the past 2 episodes in the background, and this is the episode that's going to face it head on. And
it's a young woman named Patricia.
Patricia Atkins. And I've heard of the Atkins diet, but this is ridiculous.
Thanks, AJ. And this also establishes that Father Gilbert is like Father Brown, in that he is an excellent judge of character. That's what his big thing is. He says, she came from a nice Christian family. And the guy's like, oh, yeah, sure. He's like, no, because I know them. They really are a nice Christian family. It's really important to all of this that we know that Father Gilbert's, by the way, G.K. Chesterton, What do you think the G in G.K. Chesterton stands for?
Is it Gilbert?
Yeah, it sure
is it
is.
Gerbert?
Sure is Gilbert.
Oh, it's not Gerbert. Okay.
It is not Gerbert.
Gerbert? No.
Although, again, it's the same in the katakana. So his judgment has to be like the most important thing. And you see this come up throughout all of the episodes, but especially here. He's almost never wrong on his assessment of people.
In a way, this feels to me like the kind of mystery that an AI could write. And what I mean by that is I do genuinely really get the sense that it's McCusker, right?
Yeah.
Paul McCusker has absorbed a lot of this genre, understands the rhythms of this genre, and understands the things that are said in a story like this. But one of the ways in which he consistently does Father Gilbert dirty is that he knows that some of these things need to be said for these scenes to function, but he doesn't think through at all who is saying these things, which leads to situations where you need someone to question the basic investigative procedure so that you can explain it to the audience. But it's always Father Gilbert doing it. He doesn't understand anything about why they're doing what they're doing, which implicitly makes him a moron. He doesn't know anything about investigating a mystery. And as a result, it becomes really confusing why we're following this guy in particular.
Yes. Well, and he's equally flummoxed when some guy calls into the station who sounds very creepy.
Ooh. Are you there, caller? Hello.
You know nothing about evil, Father Gilbert. You're an amateur. You always were.
What do you say?
Evil doesn't want to eliminate goodness. If we eliminated all goodness, then what would be left to corrupt? Corruption is what we love the most.
We? Who is this?
Poor little Patricia. Poor Patricia.
Do you know what the caller is talking about, Father Gilbert? Was the girl's name Patricia?
Now, I won't discuss the details of the case. Now, who is this?
Who or what?
Give us your name, caller.
You may call me Legion.
Well, man, this is embarrassing. This is not a good scare. This is a demon. Obviously, like from the start, we know this is a demon talking to him, and this is not creepy at all. Fun fact, the actor playing this demon is an actor named Brian Deacon.
Okay.
Brian Deacon has had a lot of little roles here and there over the years, including a voice in Tropico 5 for our Tropico fans. But he is Jesus in the Jesus film.
Like
the one that's been translated into
the
300
VHS one that was sent to your home?
Yes.
Oh my
one made by
I
Campus
got that
Crusade
one.
for Christ. That is the Jesus from the Jesus film. Kind of provocative casting. It's kind of fun to get like the Jesus to play the Legion.
But this is supposed to be our big inciting incident, right? Like we are supposed to be so excited and be like, oh, who's he gonna be?
Ooh.
And so they trace the call to a council flat in Hammersmith because there's a guy named Carl Higgins who lives there, and they make a big deal about like, but that didn't sound like Carl. Yeah, but it was his house that it was coming from. Okay. And
it takes forever. It takes
so fucking
long to get any of that information.
So much of the clipping of this show, because this is an hour and 15-minute long episode.
And it feels longer, folks.
Paul McCusker was like, no one will ever edit me ever again. He has no dramaturg present, and he makes every dialogue either loops or just sort of bounces back to the same beat over and over again. Someone asking, what do you mean? And then someone restating shit. This just happens all the time. So I had to cut so many of the middles out of these clips.
For me, this is another example of, McCusker like knowing the rhythms of the genre, but not understanding why any of it's there. And so part of it is that he understands that in this genre, you end scenes with a stinger. Right? That is how you exit a scene. But he cannot find the stinger at all. Ever.
Which is actually kind of strange because in Adventures in Odyssey, I think he usually pulls it off. Yeah. I'm not saying it's great writing, but like he mechanically understands what the purpose of a stinger is. So like, how did he miss the boat I think on
here?
This?
He's like, I don't have to there are no commercial breaks. So fuck it. I don't need stingers anymore. I don't need any of you motherfuckers.
but then what happens is that everything just kind of stays on the same line throughout the whole thing. Kevin, one of the things I love about listening to Juno Steel is that every single thing is punctuated by like a big sequence, either a chase sequence or a confrontation of some kind, right when we get to like a very important point of like the mystery, right? When we find out a little bit more information, there is something there that keeps you engaged so that you want to keep going. And like the danger is upped, the stakes are upped. And it is maddening listening to this and have the stakes remain the same the entire time. The way he amps up stakes is having Legion call back and say the same thing again about how the stakes are risen. And I'm like, well, I guess you are Jesus, but like, come on, man.
Just imagining some fucking horror movie that's just called Star 69.
I mean, AJ, to that point though, like I think that like one of the traps that he's falling for is bizarrely what I would associate as being a beginner writer trap. This is a thing that when I would teach creative writing and when I was a high school teacher, that I would see a lot of kids bump into and we would talk about, which is you writing the story. You probably care about your character because they live in your head, but you need to do a lot of work to sell that character and that character situation to other people. And part of how you have to do that is you need to translate some of their key emotional moments and peaks into a common language, right? So one of my favorite really concrete examples of this is like, you know, as a kid watching Star Wars, I didn't understand any of the political stuff going in the background. I didn't really understand who the rebels or the Empire were. I just knew those were words people said. But structurally, the thing that the, you know, I am your father moment does is it, instead of having this incredibly abstract cross-galactic conflict, you turn it into a family conflict, which is something that we can understand. You translate it into terms that we can get. McCusker never bothers with this. It's clear that he's sniffing Father Gilbert's farts all the time. He loves this man and he doesn't understand why we don't.
But I feel like he's trying to make it a family conflict because he ends up going and talking to this fucking family, right? Remember Patricia?
Right.
The one who died? Well, rather than like maybe, I don't know, getting a flashback to what it looked like in those moments before she died, we get this like cross-examination sequence?
Well, when I told her we'd been looking for her as a runaway, she became upset and annoyed with me for interfering. She begged me not to tell her parents where she was.
Why? If she was from such a loving family?
Well, I think she was ashamed of her situation, of whatever had led her to Soho. I don't think she felt she could go back. And she said that he wouldn't like it, that he would cause trouble for her entire family.
Who was the he she referred to?
I don't know. I asked, but she wouldn't say. She seemed trapped.
We have not met her. We don't know anything about her other than she was, and I'm quoting the original William Barry, the host of Livewire here, a good girl gone bad. So sad.
So sad.
And that's all you learn about her over the course of this, other than like, I don't know.
Things that were done to her, other than things that happened to her. You don't get like a sense of who she was or how she changed or anything.
It also doesn't help that the voice actor for Gilbert is just delivering every line at this very ponderous pace.
And you know why?
Why?
Because he's, again, not an actor. You make this guy the fucking anchor of your radio drama series. This is Adrian Plass. He is a Christian humorist from the UK.
Oh, no. For God's sake.
Wow.
And he's a public speaker. He reads lines well enough, but he's not an actor. And again, even if a writer doesn't have a quirk, a good actor can come in and at least give some friction to the character. Maybe some aspect of their performance sort of plays against the blandness. But that just doesn't happen here. And you also don't have a separate director. Paul McCusker is directing his own writing, and he's hired his friend Adrian Plass, who is not an actor, to play this role.
I don't have violent impulses ever, really. But however, I repeatedly wanted to flush this man's head in a toilet. Really badly. He's such an intolerable dork at all times.
He's turning us all into bullies.
Yeah. And I mean, so yes, we do get this attempt at showing that he cares and at showing his past history, but partially because it's him telling the story. It's not only informed characterization, it's informed characterization from the source, which ultimately, like, where he's not actually showing anything he can do, it at best to me feels like a humble brag, right? Like it's substanceless. I don't buy any of it.
Not even when we learn how sad it was for him when Patricia, I forgot her name, went off and committed suicide after he talked to her, but he thinks it wasn't a suicide. That didn't do anything for you, Kevin?
Has he gone to visit his, they go to visit like the friend of his, the former like cop friend of his.
Yeah, we're about to get there,
Yeah.
The thing that jumped out to me about that is just that he doesn't, emotionally, he doesn't appear to care. Like there's nothing there to the point where in the same scene, the coroner complains that he's lost his day off, and the coroner legitimately seems more upset about losing his day off than Gilbert is about losing like his former friend and coworker.
G.K. Chesterton has this same problem with Father Brown, where Father Brown is like too much of the smartest guy in the room. Every once in a while, Brown will say something insane, like he's trying to figure out if a cult leader is sincere. And he's like, well, you see, he's drinking wine. Somebody who loves wine is always sincere. And you're like, what the fuck does that mean? And it's not even like a quirk in the way that G.K. Chesterton sees it. It's like, that's just what G.K. Chesterton himself thinks of people.
I wanted to point to something, Kevin, that you had mentioned, which is just his general lack, Gilbert's general lack of like emotional response.
Yeah, right.
I did want to roll that clip when we learned that like Patricia, that's her name.
Write it. I had to write it in the corner of my notes so that I always have it.
I've had it tattooed on my forehead.
Oh, you shouldn't have done that.
Anyway, just listen to this shit.
But I want you to know, I tried to find Patricia's killer. But I was told by my superiors it was a closed case as a suicide. I was forbidden to investigate it further.
There's no need to trouble yourself about that part of it, Gilbert.
What do you mean?
There was never a chance that you were going to solve the case properly. Everyone was against you. Higgins, your superiors, their superiors.
What?
You weren't meant to find her, Gilbert. And since you did find her, then I believe she had to be taken out of the picture.
You think she was murdered?
It wouldn't surprise me. We're dealing with something bigger than you can imagine.
Oh, I have quite an imagination.
If you were still a police officer, I could tell you what I know, but you're a civilian now.
Now, wait a minute.
Stay close, Father Gilbert. Don't go back to Stonebridge without letting me know. We'll need to talk further.
So this woman talking is an investigator. She seems like she's partly doing like internal affairs stuff because she's like, oh, all these people are corrupt. When Higgins was found dead, she was like, oh yeah, I've been investigating him for taking bribes. And this is one of the rare moments, and it's so weirdly underdeveloped, like they don't put any kind of punctuation on it, where Gilbert is like, he would never take bribes, I know how he is, and we're supposed to understand Gilbert as this excellent judge of character, and the next scene it's like, yeah, here's the paperwork for all the fucking bribes your partner is taking his entire fucking life,
so many.
Which again could, in a better bit of writing, could set up, oh, maybe the things I know about her family are not quite what I think they are either.
Maybe I am fallible in some way, but no, you're like, and this is sort of what you were saying, Kevin, like he's too perfect. He's too upright. He's too good.
Yeah.
And I do think that one of the traps that this falls for is that, like, you know, informed characterization is to an extent cheating, but it can work. It can work really, really well. One of my favorite examples of this is Han Solo, actually, right? Like Han Solo has this massive reputation for being like super cool, super functional, super competent. But I challenge you to go back and watch those 3 movies and find a single thing he does right that is not him solving a problem that he created.
Right.
He never does anything correctly, ever.
They fell into the trap later on of buying into his bullshit, but it makes so much more sense when he's just a fucking bullshitter. It makes you love him.
Yeah.
Right. And I do think that part of the reason that he can get away with this reputation for coolness is because there's very little to contradict, actually present to contradict this informed characterization. The mistake that Dead Air keeps making, to kind of point out what you were saying, is that it's insisting that oh my God, I'm constantly forgetting his name. I've got to cop to the fact that in my notes, I accidentally call him Father Gascoigne, like from Bloodborne.
Call whatever you want, baby.
Like a werewolf.
Fucking care.
That'd be a much more fun show.
It's insisting that he's this incredible judge of character, that he can just see through situations, but it's proving it wrong and hamstringing it constantly, which leads to, at best, we can identify him as a fraud. And then, like, why are we here again?
His partner Higgins is living in government housing, and the fact that McCusker really underlines that the devil is calling from government housing.
Yeah.
I think is very important.
And the way
to
that they
his worldview.
depict squalor in this is it feels like a few steps actually down.
Dickensian. There's like a kid crying
that's
the
the
next
thing,
room
it's like,
over.
There's a woman coughing.
That's it. That's all it is. It's just a woman coughing.
It's
They
Deus
just
Ex.
hear Deus Ex, you still have people like fucking in one of the rooms. You have
true.
like dripping. There's no water sounds. You could have pipes running. No, it's just one woman coughing, and you know that this is hell on earth. Odyssey would not have standards that low.
No, it's bad. But to the point of things that are bad, we get like the forensics tech who does his little zoom enhance on the audio recording, and it sounds. This is what that sounds like.
I was using a digital filter to play around with the sound on the tape from the broadcast, and I found one very weird but interesting thing. In the background, behind our man talking, well, let me play it for you.
Had he left her alone, she might have lived. She might not have committed such a desperate act.
That's what you heard yesterday, right?
Yeah, but what's all the noise in the background? I don't remember that.
I was wondering the same thing. So I used the digital filter to hear it more clearly.
Talk faster.
This is what I found.
For the love of fucking God.
Begging you.
That's creepy. Is it some sort of bleed through on the tape, or maybe the radio or television was on in Higgins's apartment?
Or maybe, but it doesn't really sound like the radio or TV, does it? Well, they sound like him, doing different voices all at the same time.
Well, it could be
These are the same voice.
He recorded himself over and over and then played it in the background when he talked to us.
Well, that's possible too, but why?
Or to impress us. He said his name was Legion, a group of demons. He came up with some sound effects to push the point.
He did a good job as far as I'm
You
concerned.
have to stop. You have
I
to
cut
stop.
30 to 40 seconds. I cut 30 to 40 seconds out of that clip
That's insane.
because the
That's
first
nuts.
time
Oh my
they play the
God.
tape where you hear the message that he sent earlier, you just hear the whole thing.
That's right.
So I just chopped that out. But like,
hey, listeners, an hour and 16 minutes of that.
So
I got a cop to something about listening to this thing, which is, like you said, it's an hour and 15 minutes long. I think all told, I spent maybe 2.5 hours
That makes
listening to
sense.
this.
Me too.
Because I kept spacing out.
Yeah.
I would be in my friggin' mind palace in a much more interesting place. And then I'd come back and I'd be like,
wait,
God
what
damn, I have to
happened?
listen to this thing.
Yeah.
In my mind palace, there's a single woman coughing behind a door somewhere, and that's how you know it's fucked up.
I master this show a certain way. We know that people listen to this while doing other stuff. They're cooking, they're showering, they're vacuuming, whatever. Well, maybe not vacuuming, that's loud, but you know what I mean. Gooning.
Yeah, they're in the goon cave.
You got your porno on one screen, you got your podcast on the speakers. You've got your infinite running game on the other screen, and this was designed for one purpose, and that is people driving and nothing else.
Where you are being held hostage
exactly
by
the
it.
amount of
Yeah.
attention that you can get it while you are driving on the road. And even then, they also seem to know that people will forget stuff, so they keep explaining things over and over and over again.
Right. It's an imitation of the genre without understanding how the genre works.
Yeah.
Right. The CSI thing is a thing that happens in these stories, so I guess we're doing it now. Is kind of the entire justification here.
Yeah.
But the CSI thing is not translated into anything that has any kind of emotional or intellectual resonance with us. It almost does, honestly, when they're going through like that bizarre sounding like replay of the tape. And for me, that's completely deflated when that ends and someone says that was creepy. And it's like, yeah, no shit, man. Like I knew.
Like, let me in is a little scary. And it's like, okay. And then they flatten it.
The thing about the CSI moment is that it's a moment that felt familiar to me because it's exactly what the perfect witness is. It's literally just zooming in on audio that we had heard before and uncovering new stuff behind it.
However, what I'm going to say is that there is a difference here, because a perfect witness, it was expressionistic. It was someone going through their own memories and they're kind of floating around there. Here, it's just science fiction. It is just like you said, Josh. It's zoom enhance.
Yeah.
It's doing something. It's Brian, quote, one of the techno wizards down at the lab.
Yeah.
A line that Paul McCusker actually wrote into the script, who has two of the like jokes He's just doing something that's like really impossible. He's taking a voice, running it through the filter, finding the same voice behind it saying different things, and we're able to hear it clearly. But what this leads to is this one final sound with the let me in and with everything else, where he says...
That one. 4 on frith.
How does he get that information out of there?
I'm not hearing that.
Because it sounds like he's saying poor thing. And that's something where you could be using the tools of audio production at your disposal, where something sounds like 2 different things at the same time, like in a search party. But instead, they don't.
Yeah, it's interesting that like they do set up Frith Street earlier in a scene with the Bob Hoskins character that's not Bob Hoskins. And they say Frith Street, and I took a note on it because I thought they were just mispronouncing Fifth.
No, Frith. Yeah. Frith is a famous street.
Frith is a famous street, I guess, in London. But in Soho or
Soho.
Depending on which Brit is talking, we do get two completely different pronunciations.
Yeah, Father Gilbert, played by Stephen Toast.
Yeah, and this is also
down in Soho.
God, this is also the point where I took the note. What if everyone in Zodiac huffed glue?
Yeah. Well, look, we still have to check in on our morals. This is important. I hope we're all feeling morally grounded, because if we're not...
Because of our good moral parents.
We need to hear about them. And this is talking with Patricia's parents about her morals.
When Patricia ran off, Mr. Magnuson was suddenly a saint to us. He was so concerned and said he'd do all he could to find her. But after she died, I began thinking of little things I didn't dare mention later.
Like what, Mrs. Atkins?
He teased her. I mean, Mr. Magnuson teased Patricia, called her Miss Goody Two-Shoes, and what a straight Christian she was.
Oh.
It was as if our church-going was a joke to him, as if he didn't believe that people could live that kind of life and mean it. Patricia once hinted that Mr. Magnuson had made advances to her, if you know what I mean.
What else would that mean?
Indeed I do. I was all set to go over and clobber him. In all Christian love, of course. But you stopped me.
I thought it must have been some sort of misunderstanding, that Patricia had misunderstood what he meant or what he'd said, that's all. But now
Now?
I've wondered about it.
It was as if there were 2 sides to the man. On one hand, we didn't trust him. And yet he did things for us, for Patricia, that seemed like godsends.
What do you mean?
Well, Mr. Magnuson was able to get Patricia an internship with Parliament.
They then go on to explain what an internship is for some reason for their adult audience.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like if this is for adults, don't explain all this. But he's just been writing for Odyssey so long. It's like
to make advances towards her, if you know what I mean.
I'm saying.
Yeah, of course I know what you mean. That's not an ambiguous statement.
Why would you not lead with that? Like, it's like,
that seems
he called
more
her
important.
a goody two-shoes. Also, he molested her. And I'm
By
like,
the way,
what the fuck are you talking about?
Magnuson was this PM that got Scotland Yard or whatever to start investigating the missing persons case. Otherwise, it would have never even been investigated.
Like, you don't know who this guy is, and now the only thing you know about him is that he's a horrible pervert, which then means that any subsequent interaction you have with him is going to be colored by that. It goes back to the thing that you were saying earlier about how, like, he can only put Father Gilbert in a good way, which means that he can only put the bad guys in a bad way. It's the same problem going the other way, I think.
And the bad guys always have to make fun of you for your Christianity.
Yeah.
In a country with a state religion.
The thing that really bothers me about that, beyond it, just like, I didn't grow up with any media like this. So the fact that somebody wrote this down and like thought people worry about this was completely alien to me on the one hand. But on the other, it's, first impressions are everything when you are establishing a character, and having the first impression be a character assassination is like actually a really compelling hook, but you need to have the reversal afterwards.
Yeah.
If you don't have the reversal, then frankly, there's no reason for Magnuson to appear in this story. You can completely skip him because we've learned everything about him. He's done.
Well, I think that what McCusker was trying to do here was frame up Magnuson as the primary suspect, but again, mechanically not quite understanding what you would need to do to draw the connection between this, that, and the other thing, because he doesn't really have a motivation or anything like that for the potential murder that we know of. Really, all we're getting out of this is the thing of like, well, Christians sure are persecuted, aren't they?
Yep.
And I think that's the piece you were picking up on, Kevin.
There is a place for storytelling that works in extremely broad strokes like this. I'm not saying that that's inherently flawed, but one of the benefits to working in broad strokes is that you can then go really fast, right? You can nail down the like kind of mythic swipes at what is going on here, and you can have your good versus evil war. But then for God's sake, don't like make me sit through what feels like half an hour and probably was for me because I kept on having to rewind because I kept spacing out.
Okay, here's the thing, Kevin. People need to know what an internship is. The whole thing hinges on this.
You're telling me that you didn't want to go back to the lab with Murphy again? Come on.
Oh my God. I've done my time with Murphy. Me and Murphy, we're done.
He is a techno wizard, let me tell you.
They do interrogate Magnuson. He's lying about something, and it's like
completely useless scene.
But what is he lying about?
Yeah, like he just lies. They get no information of any sort. It's like 2 minutes long, and they could have just not had the scene entirely.
Great. Anyway,
fun.
let's get part 2 of Murphy in the lab, shall we?
Brace yourselves.
Why?
Well, I was analysing the second tape, the one you found under the dead man's pillow, yeah? But here's how it sounded at first.
Dear Father Gilbert.
And we do it again! We do it the fuck again!
Dramatic, but slow and efficiently corrupting. Look at poor Higgins.
Look at him.
It took
Look
him
at him.
all these years to realise he
All
was
these
better
years.
off dead than alive.
And then I thought I heard some bleed through, almost like the broadcast tape.
Did you?
So I put
Like
it through
the
the same
first
filtering process. Here's what you're not hearing in the background.
What shall we do with the girl?
We can do whatever we want.
She's ours. She's ours, but her time is running out.
Do you understand, Father?
Terrific.
Now, wait a minute. I listened to that tape over and over again. I didn't hear anything like that.
Well, this is the thing that's bothering me. I didn't hear it at first either.
Okay.
But then the more I listened, the more I could hear those voices in the
go on.
background. It was as if
Okay.
they were getting louder each time I played the tape.
Oh, that would be fun if that was a thing that we were actually doing in this story, but oh well.
Am losing my mind. I want to do a mental health check-in with everyone right now.
Sure,
How are we
okay,
feeling?
Sure, okay. So here's the thing. Josh, Brian, I hate you. I hate you so much. I hate that you've done this to us.
Yeah.
And I know that's a problem because the more I say that, the more happy you get. And I don't like you feeling happy.
Because here's the thing, AJ.
Yeah.
No matter how much you hate me, you can never be as much as I hate me.
Yeah, that
you keep thinking you're gonna get to the top of that summit, and you never will. And I will always win.
Yeah. There are two things I'm thinking about at this very particular moment. One, Gilbert just being like, hey, Murphy, can you just like listen to all the tapes and then just deliver all this information at the same time? So I don't have to
they're
keep
different
coming
tapes.
the
See,
fuck
that's the
back
thing.
here.
You're actually just missing something,
they found
AJ.
a new
These
tape.
are different tapes.
Oh.
Every time Father Gilbert finds a new clue, there's a tape there.
It's an immersive sim. They're just walking around leaving recordings of their voices in tape recorders.
I want
like
you-
fucking System
I want
Shock.
you to imagine playing Dead Space, and every time you get an audio log, you have to bring it to a third party to translate it back to you. And that's the tedium of this. The second thing I'm thinking of is that Father Gilbert's parish is just sitting in the pews waiting for him to get back. Refusing to move for the entirety of this investigation.
That's right. He's got a whole congregation to look after, doesn't he? He's
And
an
it's, at
active
a certain
priest.
point, it's going to get dark and the wolves are going to come out. And what will become
Wolves
of them then?
love churches. That's
They
the
love
first
them.
place they go.
An all-you-can-eat buffet.
Follow up on the 4 on Frith thing. We learn what the meaning of that is. Do we have to play the clip, Brian? Do we have to?
That one's only 30 seconds long.
Okay.
4 on Frith. Why, what does it mean?
Oh, it was an old password.
Oh!
To what?
Here's not Bob Hoskins.
Well, there was a gentleman's club over near Whitehall. Posh. You know, all the big wigs went. It was called the Legion. I had a guy who worked for me. He used to be a waiter for the place. Cleared tables mostly. And boy, the stories he could tell.
Oh.
Music, dancing, drugs, girls.
Oh.
Anyway, 4 on Frith was the password to get in.
I don't know why I had to say it twice.
That was 30 seconds. That clip was 30 seconds. Oh my God.
I just love the things. We're getting real edgy over here. Girls dancing.
And if you want to talk about like family friendly noir, that actually is fairly well trod. I know you guys did an episode on Who Framed Roger Rabbit recently.
Right. Yeah.
That is tied for my #1 movie of all time, partially because it does something on the script level that I find really impressive, which is it is both a parody of a genre and it is an incredibly good example of that genre.
Yes, absolutely.
And this cannot operate on that level. It understands the sound of a noir mystery. It understands the beats of one, but it's living on another planet in terms of stakes, right? It feels like it cannot communicate with us humans in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if I told you that they find another cassette tape? What if I told you that shit?
I feel like it's a bad sign if your audio drama could be converted into like a Left 4 Dead 2 mod where like you get to the safe house and at the end of every level and you get a cassette tape as your little carrot.
Well, it turns out that in this story, Magnuson is getting blackmailed.
Yeah, they go to the old Legion club and it's empty and there's just like a mattress in the corner. And the mattress has a bunch of nude pictures of Magnuson. He has become nude with all kinds of ladies, which again, they have to go all Hays Code and kind of tiptoe around what it's saying. And that comes with another tape.
Yep.
And this tape is the most G.K. Chesterton out of all these things, where McCusker's trying to really turn this into some sort of dialogue about good and evil, but there is zero substance here. Just take a listen.
Evil corrupts, and then it consumes what it corrupts. Its appetite is enormous. We want not only bodies and minds. Those things are easy.
Ooh, is it souls? Do you want souls? Yeah, souls?
Ask yourself why, Father Gilbert.
Is it for a soul?
Why is this happening now?
Do you want souls for that?
But you better hurry to find the answer. Time is running out.
Oh yeah, Magnuson's daughter is also kidnapped and she's dying or whatever.
Right. And that's the thing. That's the other big thing, right? The way they tell you that the stakes are raising is they're just like running out of time. But they never give a time frame, and they never clearly articulate what is even happening that would require the time to be ticking down. Like, is she in an acid bath? Like, is there like a string that's holding her over a cliff that will burn once the candle goes through it? Like, what is happening?
This happens in Father Gilbert in other episodes where it's like someone's in a cabin, but he at least like establishes, oh yeah, this guy needs medication. It's like you need to find the cabin somewhere. But this also happens a lot on Odyssey, especially 2010's Odyssey. Is like someone's in a cabin somewhere, you got to find them. Fuck it.
I mean, I think that this is a common writing mistake too. That like I think the thing that people misunderstand about stakes in terms of how we take them in as an audience is that immediacy always beats severity. Right.
Yeah.
The example that I would always use with my creative writing classes is if you imagine two stories, right? One in which a meteor is going to hit the earth and destroy it completely in 400 years, and one in which you have a math test in 30 seconds and you did not study for it. The second one makes your stomach drop. The first one sucks, but it's not tense. And so that is why you need to translate everything into, even if it's a larger scale thing, like something's going to happen to this girl, right? You need to be able to tell me, what's that mean in the next 5 minutes? What do I need to do right now?
Usually in procedurals, that's what makes them tick mechanically, is that you get the next clue. And the clue gives you the payoff of, you need to be in this place by this time or else I will.
Yeah.
It's this weird thing too, because it also doesn't, just thinking about it very logically and straightforwardly, it doesn't make sense that the guy would leave a tape there, not knowing how long it would necessarily even take for Father Gilbert to get to the fucking place, you know? Like, it's like, what is the plan here?
Yeah.
What is the bad guy's plan? That's the other thing that I got completely fucking lost on, was like, what is supposed to be happening in an overarching sense? Plot-wise, what are we racing against?
Well, but that's because Paul McCusker always also wants to have some big themes in here. He's always approaching these stories in the way that people would approach like social drama. Right, the first one, like I said, had like this abortion thing going on. That was like a sort of stealth abortion plot until like the last 5 minutes. Where like one character's like, yeah, I've just been feeling very sick lately. And you're like, oh my God, just say she's pregnant. We get it. Mm-hmm. Here, he wants to make this larger comment about sin and about like sex trafficking and how it corrupts the soul and how also demon possession is real. And here is how it happens. It's not like in a William Peter Blatty novel. And he's trying to do all of that. Weirdly, this should be more interesting than that because he's trying to do all these things, but it's not. And he talks about in that tape, the demon is like, oh yeah, being how evil claims you, how evil corrupts you. And in the thesis of this, it's these girls or like Higgins committing suicide because of the demons, because they have allowed the evil that has been inflicted upon them to corrupt them. And I thought this was a really interesting point of comparison. We can compare Patricia Atkins in Father Gilbert to, say, Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks. Right. Someone whose life goes off the rails, who is a victim of sex trafficking and sexual abuse, who gets addicted to drugs, who's also dealing drugs, who gets involved in all of this kind of stuff, but is not considered to be a literal lost soul. In fact, she's kind of like this incorrupt soul, even up to the point of her death and afterwards, and she's so important to the rest of the plot. But like the way that McCusker views the world is like these girls are still committing this sexual sin. Yeah. And so, man, it's over for them. He even says at one point she could have been a saint, but she wasn't. Too bad. No.
We get to the point where like Higgins didn't kill himself.
Yeah,
Surprise.
There's a re-autopsy. Higgins, remember Higgins? Of course you don't.
Autopsy 2. Let's just get back in there.
Yeah,
like they found them with razors that weren't their own, but they were all the same brand of razors for every victim. And it turned out Higgins didn't kill himself. He was poisoned, and then the person who poisoned him then slit his wrists after he died.
I cannot stress enough how none of that matters.
Doesn't matter.
In terms of the overall mystery, like the fact that he was poisoned was like, it's like getting to the end of the Book of Eli and finding out that Denzel Washington's character was blind the whole time. It changes nothing of what you've seen.
We're learning now too that like the main bad guy, his name is Dr. Plusier. Yeah. I guess
it's
that
French
happens
for group of people, so it's loosely translatable as Legion.
We figure out the sound under another fucking tape. It turns out that
I'm not going to play this one. It's 2 minutes long. I'm not going to play it. I'm sorry.
God, no. It turns out that it was a radio play.
Yeah, you
that
remember
was
the two
recorded
guys
to
that
the
sounded
tape.
like mooks, and they were like, oh yeah, remember that, father? No, it was a radio play about two guys who killed someone, and they were talking to their father, meaning a dad.
And they recorded, and the tape was from the radio station that Father Gilbert went on at the beginning.
And then the pinball wizard from the lab tells Father Gilbert about like the production tones at the beginning of the tape, but you don't hear the production tones.
No.
And the thing is, the tones could be an important thing to a creepy horror plot, but again, they throw it out the window. They throw the aesthetics out the window because, God damn it, we got a soul to save here.
That's right. It also turns out that Dr. Plousier's real name is Dr. Bouvier, because at this point, why not?
No, I actually have an answer to this one.
Oh, do you? Tell me, please.
There was a doctor earlier in this episode named Dr. Simpson, and Bouvier is Marge's maiden name, which means
you're right. You're right.
Oh my God.
This is the Simpsons. Oh my God. You're watching The Simpsons. We finally have fucking proof.
His real name is actually, if you combine both of those names, and then it's Bussy.
Bussy.
They go back. Bussier is what I use to prop up my pussy.
It turns out, by the way, just to tie the plot piece together, because I know you are all tracking
You're on
this.
the edge of your seats, and I'm on the seat of my edge in the cave.
Welcome to the caves.
It turns out that the guy who called in at the beginning was actually a hoaxer who was known to and employed by the radio station.
Yeah, he was a radio. He was Dr. Drew.
That's right.
So, but he's Dr. Bouvier. He's Dr. Bussy. So Dr. Bussy, the killer, has just been waiting for Father Gilbert to come on the show for years so that he can do his final greatest prank and kill everyone that he knows?
They all get back together at the station to talk about what they learned.
How's the girl, Father Gilbert?
Oh, physically she's in pretty good shape, but
we're going to learn some very serious things here.
Did she really run away from home?
Yes.
Did she say why?
She received a tip-off about her father and his various clubs. The Legion wasn't the only one he belonged to.
Oh, no.
He's been involved in a whole string of them. And worse, she looked on Magnuson's computer at home and she found an entire disk drive of pornography.
What? He couldn't do the illegal kind of pornography. It's just regular pornos.
That's not worse than being involved in human trafficking, which he was.
Right. Yeah. He was actually trafficking teenage girls. And then she found out that he had like a subscription to Brazzers.
At this point, we're pretty close to the end of the episode.
Yes,
and when I was
we are.
listening to this for the first time, they got to that line, and I literally had to pause and take a walk.
Yes.
The fact that like her entire motivation for starting this mystery is like, I found Dad's Pornhub account is, I can't. It's so funny.
However, this all makes sense if you're the kind of person that we were that also watched the Ted Bundy interview. If you listen to our last Wits Endless Summer, all of this connects because it's true crime magazines, pornos with penetration in them, and then you're killing women.
That's right. Yeah, that's the natural order of things.
Yeah.
I had utterly lost the thread at this point. I had no idea what was going on. Fucking,
and this is not the end.
No, there's a lady who's, Sherlock's landlady from fucking,
in Father Ted, they have the lady that's always pouring tea even if they don't want it, especially if they don't want it. So here we have Mrs. Mayhew. She's his house lady or whatever. She's a main character in all the other episodes, but since he was in London, she wasn't there. She's played by June Whitfield, who is in the Carry On movies. She was the mom in Ab Fab, and she, at the time of this recording, was just finishing up playing Miss Marple on BBC 4, which she had been doing for 8 years at that point.
Oh, wow.
This conversation ends up being the theme of the whole show. So here we go.
I can't help but think about the various lessons I received from the doctor about evil.
Oh, the man is obviously off his rocker. Why listen to him?
Because he may be right.
Also, why does she know everything about this case already?
There's more to evil than I've allowed in my thinking, in my beliefs. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself if people can really be possessed?
Like they are in the movies?
No, like on TV.
Not like the movies, but got him. If Dr. Plusier or Bouvier or whatever he's called is the embodiment of a demon. What if he was an average person like you or me who opened himself up to evil and it took control of him?
I'm sorry, Father Gilbert, but I'd rather not have this conversation. Men possess the power to do evil, but I do not believe evil powers can possess men.
At this point, I had mentally completely checked out.
Good answer.
That was the demon. The demon was making you lose focus.
That's fine on it. The demon's doing me a solid at that point.
The demon of ADHD.
and here's the thing about this worldview from McCusker. It makes it so you are not culpable for any of your actions.
That's true.
In a way that is deeply sick and twisted, and it's a way of not dealing with darker impulses that come into you. Because it's literally the devil made me do it, which has never resulted in the deaths of many people in history.
McCusker would refute that, and he would do so with the next scene. In fact.
Let's hear it.
So Father Gilbert finally returns to his house, and he goes and checks out his answering machine.
Don't you just always do that when you get home?
There better not be something behind the voice on that answering machine.
On a tape? No.
First message.
We have to sit through the whole tape.
Father Gilbert, I'm glad you made it home safe and sound. I'm sorry we didn't get to have a one-to-one chat. Perhaps we can now.
No.
Now, there's no need to phone anyone just yet. Relax. Would you like some music? No. I think
honestly, I really wanted that to be Mbop. Because in an Mbop, he's gone.
Don't run away, Father Gilbert. I want to talk to you.
So his answering machine has locked the doors.
I hate it when that happens.
The Internet of Things strikes again. So this keeps going. The tenor keeps pitching up. And basically the whole point is that Legion was here for Father Gilbert's soul. Everyone else was just sort of in the way. He just wants to defeat Father Gilbert so that he succumbs to the demons of stinkin' thinking. And Father Gilbert makes a choice that Higgins did not make and that Dr. Bussey did not make.
I'd much rather talk about you, Father. Let's talk about your failure to save Patricia Atkins.
I know what you're doing. Our Father, who art in
dare
heaven,
you think you are
hallowed be
willing to
thy
receive
name.
God's
Thy
grace after what
kingdom
you did?
come, thy will
Patricia
be done on
Atkins
earth
is dead
as it
because
is
of
in
you,
heaven.
and may
Give
I
us
say how
this
much
day
we are
our
enjoying
daily
her
bread,
soul.
and forgive
You
us
gave
our
her to us,
trespasses,
Gilbert.
even as
So
we
don't
forgive
pray
those who
now as if
trespass
God can
against
hear you,
us.
because he
Lead
can't.
us not
He
into
won't listen.
temptation,
You are
but
unworthy,
deliver us
Gilbert.
from evil.
Do you hear?
Now, in the
Unworthy
name
of
of
that grace
Jesus
you so
Christ,
desire.
go! Oh, God have mercy.
Second message.
Lewis, it's Henry here. I thought you'd be pleased to know that we caught Dr. Plusier earlier this afternoon.
Oh,
He's
man.
in the interrogation room right now. You wouldn't believe it. He's a broken man. He's confessing to everything, even things we didn't ask him about. He's claiming insanity, of course. Says the devil himself drove him to do it all.
And then Father Gilbert is listening to the rest of this message and he just starts crying and then it ends.
I got to be honest, and I think you asked me for a mental health check earlier.
Yeah.
I think at this point in listening to this, I had been worn down to such an extent that something finally happened and I lost my mind. I went from being bored out of my mind to having such a good time in about 2 seconds flat.
Well, it went from being boring to being kind of cool. Like,
the sound design is so good in this. It's very actually scary, and it's playing with like how it dances between your left and right ears in a very, very
it sounds
fun
like
way.
his voice is coming through like the pots and pans in his house, you know?
Well, to an extent, it becomes clear that like what McCusker's heart is really in is essentially writing The Exorcist, right?
Yeah.
And like one of the things I love about Blatty's novel of The Exorcist is that it is it's kind of a tour de force of a few different genres. Like it flips genre over the course of it. And to an extent, but like, you know, it's all building up to this final confrontation. And that's really what's going on. And I wish McCusker would just focus on the final confrontation, I guess, because that's where the juice is, right? Like that's where something's actually happening.
Yeah, he's playing chess with the devil. That's what all of this was supposed to be. And instead he's getting his ass beat for the entire game. And then he just throws the pieces on the floor at the end by praying when it could have actually even just get rid of most of the mystery and have him just spar with this guy and fight with his own self in the same way that like the priest in The Exorcist is figuring his shit out. And, you know, the issues with his mother and everything like that. Like all of that makes so much more sense than whatever we just did for the last hour and 15 minutes.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
It's like a middling episode of Tatort, but then Satan shows up.
And it's just also so clear that like Paul McCusker is dealing with some sort of like he's trying to deal with some sort of like anxiety thing of just like, because you know it's
his
voice,
crisis of faith.
I just think that he drowns it out by saying the Lord's Prayer, which is also a great sort of summation of his career. There's all this stuff that he absolutely refuses to deal with because he's just screaming Jesus Christ at it over and over again. And it makes his work suffer for it, because his best stuff is when there isn't any sort of religious aspect to it whatsoever. When he actually has his characters just talk to each other and express true feelings towards each other. But the lesson of this seems to be just pray hard enough and you'll be fine.
Yep.
Which is no way to live a life.
And I'm curious too, Kevin, because like, again, we sort of threw you in the deep end on this one. Was there anything else that you took away from this just in terms of like the prevailing ideology? Because we talked a lot about the mechanics of the writing, but I'm curious what jumped out at you in terms of like the story that they're trying to tell or the message that they're trying to get across.
In both this and the Odyssey episodes that we looked at, right, there is a real baked in reverence for authority that is inherent.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? There's kind of this assumption that these people would not, with the exception of the people who like are sinful and they trick their way into power. There is this kind of assumption that these people wouldn't have these jobs if they couldn't do them. Right. Which is that assumption carries a lot. And I do think that it is part of the reason that I don't think McCusker sees a conflict or a contradiction in the fact that Gilbert's entire reputation is about how he's good at doing his job, but materially in the story, he sucks at it. He's really bad at it. And I think it's partially because of this worldview that like, well, Gilbert wouldn't have this job if he wasn't good at it. So he must be good at it.
I'm exhausted.
Too. And hey, to the point of folks being good at stuff. Kevin, you've been a fantastic guest, and we really appreciated your presence. Really just going through the shit with us. Like, we do these episodes so every so often where we kind of lose our minds together, and doing it with a guest. I mean, I hope you haven't absorbed too much psychic damage, but we had a good time.
No, I mean, I played it up a bit, but this was a ton of fun, guys. Thank you for having me on. I love doing this stuff.
So if folks want to listen to some good audio drama, what should they do?
So right now, the Juno and Second Citadel series, as of a month or two ago, they have ended. They are complete. If you were to listen to the entire thing from the very start, you can look up the Penumbra Podcast on your podcast app, or you can go to us at patreon.com/Penumbra Podcast. If you were to listen to the whole thing beginning to end without sleeping, it would take you almost exactly 4 days. So hope you're not busy. Beyond that, early October, we're going to start on our bonus content platform, which we'll be announcing on Patreon. We're going to start releasing parts to a Juno Steel audiobook called If Memory Serves, a Juno Steel Mystery. So that is a whole novel. It will end up being a whole novel. That is an extended mystery that, dear God, I hope it hangs together better than this one.
That's a pretty low bar.
I guarantee you it does, Kevin. As an avid listener, I got turned on to Penumbra, I think a couple months ago, and I've been binging it pretty much ever since. It is really remarkable what you are able to do, not just with Juno, but also with Citadel, and how you can like straddle those two different genres, and jump back and forth with like such alacrity. It is. Look, I listened to the Juno Steel finale and I cried quite a bit more than I was anticipating.
But to be fair, AJ,
shut the fuck up. So yeah,
AJ is a very sensitive man.
I'm a very sensitive boy, but also it was so beautiful, and it does the thing that I love that every series finale does, which is just it leaves the potential future open in a way that is so fucking haunting, man. I can't stress enough that you have to, if anybody here has enjoyed any of my interstitial stuff at all, you have to give Penumbra a try.
Absolutely.
It is so, it rhymes in a very beautiful way.
And I really liked that you ended it with all the characters saying the Lord's Prayer together.
and casting off the demon of Legion.
And before we do our customary reading of the Lord's Prayer to sign us off, I should mention that we also have a Patreon. It is patreon.com/worstofall. $5 a month gets you access to a whole back catalog of premium episodes, some good Bobus content, also a fancy movie time with Brian and AJ, where they talk about fancy movies, and $10 a month also gets you access to our Lads Cast, where we just kind of shoot the shit about what's on our mind every month. So, with that said, AJ, you got something for us to wrap us up? Take us home?
I certainly do.
Okay.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
I'm the worst of all possible Bryans.
For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes. We'll see you next week.